Part 84. I'm Really Immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Siahua. Chapter 856. Get out of class ended at noon. She felt like she had been studying all morning. Zhu Huntang was quite tired and wanted to find a place to rest. Of course, her first choice was the resting place converted from a factory she originally purchased. The rooftop of Bai was once used as a place for her and Bai Hui to practice dancing. After it was reinforced, it could take off and land her heavy-duty luxury helicopters with tires. Thinking of his own plane, Zhu Huntang thought of his dog. The dog called the door owner liked to bite the tires of the helicopter, so Zhu Huntang felt a little aggrieved because he was taken care of by the dog door owner again today. In this world, only Qinyanan's flesh can give her warmth. The very aggrieved Zhu Huntang felt that Bifenal's flesh could not satisfy her need to act coquettishly and bury her breasts, so she decided to go to Qinyanan and spend an afternoon with her. As for I wouldn't even go to the afternoon class. When Lu Chang'an walked out of the classroom, he saw Zhu Huntang running away with her hands folded, but he didn't care about her. He just beat her up today. He shouldn't need to worry about it in the afternoon. She would be honest. Come to class. Qin's Haiqiang came to Lu Chang'an for dinner. As soon as the two of them walked out of the teaching building, Tong 11 trotted over, jumping up and down. Qin's Haiqiang, why did you leave first and didn't wait for me? I asked you yesterday if you wanted to have dinner together at noon today. Didn't you say you didn't know? Qin's Haiqiang smiled. Lu Chang'an and I went to the boys' dormitory to eat. It's been a long time since we had the small intestine skin there. After saying that, Qin's Haiqiang and Lu Chang'an continued to walk forward. Tong 11 opened his mouth slightly and was surprised to see Qin's Haiqiang just leave, talking and laughing with Lu Chang'an, as if he didn't feel that he had left Tong 11 behind. Okay, Qin's Haiqiang. How was my performance just now? Have I completely gotten rid of my dog-licking attitude? Qin's Haiqiang resisted the urge to look back at Tong 11's reaction and asked Lu Chang'an nervously. Where have you come from? This is just the first step for you. Tong 11 just thinks your behavior is a bit strange now, but he still doesn't take it too seriously. He will even face you with the same cold attitude, waiting for you. Go to her and make up. Then you have to hold on and continue to talk to her like a normal person, but don't apologize, and don't feel like you're at fault. This is the most important thing, Lu Chang'an reminded. People like Qin's Haiqiang have really good personalities, but such people are often easily bullied and ignored in real life. If he cares too much about other people's feelings, others will not care much about his feelings. After all, there is equality in this world. There aren't many people to get along with. I understand, Tong 11 is actually quite nice. She knows that I like her, but she can't make up her mind because she has never been with a boy before, Qin's Haiqiang said helplessly. Come on. Licking a dog is something you should do only after you have deep feelings and get a reciprocal response. Before that, you can lick until the end. Judging from my experience of men and women in the past few thousand years, it is too nonsense. In the Book of Songs, in the era of, all the young men who picked up girls on the road and went home left behind descendants. Those honest young men who worked for their neighbors and hoped that the girls next door would marry them were all extinct, Lu Chang'an recalled with regret. Will you be criticized if you talk like this? Qin's Haiqiang said worriedly. No, there isn't much traffic. Why are you trying to hit me? At most, you can spray a few words. That's true. But don't women in ancient times like honest young men? Qin's Haiqiang thought for a while, but still didn't quite agree. As early as the 1980s and 1990s, when girls were looking for partners, the mainstream seemed to want men to be honest. That's true. I was also an honest man in the 1980s and 1990s, Lu Chang'an smiled. Pull it as hard as you can. The two of them came to the canteen and ordered food, and found that Lin Feng was also eating here. During the military training last year, Qin's Haiqiang felt that Lin Feng was quite annoying, but in the end he did not become the squad leader. He curried favor with Minister Yuan in the courtyard. That Minister Yuan was beaten by Lu Chang'an again, and Lin Feng was even criticized in front of the counselor. Later, for some reason, he got on good terms with Guan Yuan and offended Lu Chang'an again at a party. Guan Yuan, who seemed to be able to support Lin Feng, has now dropped out of school. It was so unlucky that Qin's Haiqiang wanted to order a dish and send it to Lin Feng. Lu Chang'an, Guan Yuan plans to return to Juncha recently. Qin's Haiqiang raised his head and found that Lin Feng had come over to talk to Lu Chang'an. Lin Feng was sneering stiffly. Guan Yuan is definitely a celebrity in Hunan University now. After Guan Yuan went to Brazil, he did not cut off contact with his original teachers and classmates. He used WeChat moments. Even Bai Hui knew that Guan Yuan became a gang boss in Brazil. His former classmates spread the word about Guan Yuan's experience, and now almost the whole school knows that there is an alumnus of Hunan University who dropped out of school in his freshman year and went to Brazil to become a gang boss. Well, what next? Lu Chang'an ate the fried small intestine skin with green peppers, feeling a little emotional that this is the authentic taste of small intestine skin. In the bundled chicken he ate recently, there was very little small intestine skin, almost all of it was starch, and there was no more. It smells like it used to. Can he come back? Won't he be caught? Qin's Haiqiang was surprised. According to Articles 7 and 10 of the criminal law, in accordance with personal jurisdiction and adapting to our country's criminal law, if the maximum penalty is 3 years or less, there is no need to pursue it. Therefore, in the end, it still depends on whether the person has given up his nationality and joined the nationality of another country, and whether he has been sentenced to prison in Brazil. Lu Chang'an explained, you can't judge the crime based on your circle of friends. Aren't you afraid? Lin Feng couldn't help but wonder when he saw Lu Chang'an being so calm. This Lu Chang'an was really used to being arrogant, and he didn't know what his background was. After Minister Yuan was beaten, he acted honestly and made no other noise. He didn't say anything when Lin Feng asked him. He even alienated and ostracized Lin Feng, which made Lin Feng feel uncomfortable. Minister Yuan could not be fully aware of the mistakes he had made. I feel like I should be beaten. Lu Chang'an couldn't help but smile. What am I afraid of? Do you believe that before he entered the country, all the pictures in his circle of friends were deleted? Only then did Lin Feng realize that no matter how powerful Guan Yuan was in Brazil, he would have to be honest no matter whether he was a dragon or a tiger when he came here. He might not be able to do it when facing ordinary people, let alone a local snake like Lu Chang'an. Thinking of this, Lin Feng left without saying a word, thinking that Guan Yuan was no longer a nobody, and there would be no harm in getting along well with him when he came back. After eating in the cafeteria, Lu Chang'an went to the dormitory and sat down. He found that his bed was covered with a dust-proof cloth. He took off the dust-proof cloth and found that the quilt and sheets were neat, clean, and exuding fragrance. This didn't seem to be something a roommate would do. Wei Xuanyi took the initiative to tell Lu Chang'an that it was Qin Yanan who came to take care of it. Forget it about my biological sister. It turns out that my cousin can also be Voldemort, Sun Shutong said with emotion. In fact, if you don't serve as a class cotter, it is difficult for ordinary students to see the counselor. On the contrary, it is the people in this dormitory who see the most. Lu Chang'an does not. After spending the night in this dormitory, Qin Yanan still often came to tidy his desk and bed. Ordinary counselors, no one is interested in getting in touch with her, but Qin Yanan is different. Every time I see her, I always feel like the youthful hormones are exploding in my body. I want to fall in love, have a girlfriend, and have sex. I can't help myself when it comes to things related to reproduction. Why isn't my sister like this? I was beaten by her for a whole month after I went back to the winter vacation. After I got to school, I found out that she had stolen half of my red envelope of lucky money. I complained to my mother. My mother said that she was in love. There is a lot of money, Wei Xuanyi said how angry his sister was. If I don't play mobile games, I feel like I have nowhere to spend my money, Qin's Haiqiang said with emotion. He mainly still has income. In addition to buying some cosmetics and women's clothing, he spends much less than before on mobile games. You can find a girlfriend, and then apply for love expenses with your mother, Lu Chang'an suggested. In fact, with Wei Xuanyi's conditions, it is easy to find a girlfriend, but like Sun Shutong, he seems to have a very high vision. I want to find a girlfriend to support me so I don't have to spend any money, Wei Xuanyi laughed. The kind with a private jet, Sun Shutong sneered. Wei Xuanyi glared at Sun Shutong. The two looked at each other, both a little embarrassed and bored. It was true that they couldn't help but pick up the pot. The one who flew the private jet gave them an impressive first lesson of the school year. Lu Chang'an smiled and thought that no one should worry about Zhu Huntang. If Lu Chang'an and Su Mei talked on the phone and accidentally revealed that Zhu Huntang was in love with so-and-so, Su Mei would probably kill that person. Why are there so many princes in princess love stories? Because ordinary people were killed by the king. Looking at his neat and clean bed, Lu Chang'an decided to check on Qin Yinan. He took out his mobile phone and made a call, only to find out that she had returned to Lushan Mountain at noon. Having decided to go see her, Lu Chang'an didn't think it was a bit far, so he bought a bottle of orange juice and walked to the top of Lushan Mountain while drinking it. Lu Chang'an clicked into the circle of friends to see if Shang Guandandan had caught any good cards in the morning, but found that Yan Qingcheng had posted a message, visiting her alma mater with her mother. The accompanying picture shows a woman with a slightly thin back, staring blankly at the green sycamore trees in spring. My father wants to meet your mother, Lu Chang'an thought for a while and left a message. What do you think happened between Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui? I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 857. March in Junxia is cold and windy like winter, but the pretty girls still can't wait to put on their short skirts. Even if their white skin is frozen and turns as red as the belly of a dead fish, they still don't want to put on a layer of stockings. Yan Hui's eyes moved away from the college students coming and going. After so many years, she stepped onto the campus of Hunan University again. The feeling of strangeness and familiarity were intertwined, which easily made people feel trance-like. Campuses in this era seem to be more calm and energetic, and the gloomy weather has difficulty affecting the vitality exuded by young people. Yan Hui pulled up her knitted jacket, but this youthful vigor made her feel older. The kind of gray silence that she didn't have much expectations for the future accumulated in her quiet eyes. When others look at when you look into her eyes, you often get the feeling that this woman's life is over. Until she saw her daughter, there was light in her pupils. Yan Hui is wearing a cheongsam. She has a thin face and a slightly thin figure. Such a woman wearing a cheongsam always has a more literary and artistic flavor, rather than making people feel like a beauty in the world like a certain female professor from Hunan University who likes to wear a cheongsam. Stunningly enchanting. She moved her eyes away from Yan Qingcheng's face and stared blankly at the sycamore tree that was pulling out its young leaves in the spring breeze. This kind of tree was all over Hunan University. Some were planted by him, and some were planted by her and him. When she left Xiongda, these trees had already taken root. After so many years, there is no news from him. The leaves of these sycamore trees are whirling, but they seem to be telling the story of his past in detail. Only a thoughtful person can understand the whisper of the tree. Yan Hui approached a sycamore tree and pressed her palms on the damp bark that was accumulated with dust. It was one of the sycamore trees planted that year. Not sure whether it was the rough and cold bark that made her heart tremble, or whether the tree remembered his voice. Yan Hui's words rang in her heart. The world knows autumn when a leaf falls, and the leaves here are sycamore leaves. The phoenix cannot rest on the sycamore tree. If you plant the sycamore tree, the phoenix will come. At that time, Lu Jianxi wore a green wicker round hat on his head, which was made from willow leaves picked by Yan Hui. Children would prepare one when playing war games. Then can I understand that you are waiting for your lover, teacher? Only a woman like a phoenix is worthy of you, teacher. Yan Hui, the beautiful girl from Hunan University, holds a hoe in one hand and a sharp in the other. There was no class today, and the teacher I admired most asked me to plant a tree, so Yan Hui came excitedly. Nothing is naturally worthy of me. Only the ones I like are worthy of me. Lu Jianxi looked at Yan Hui and smiled. There are two particularly beautiful girls in Xiongda University. One of them is in my eyes, and the other one is always very lively. She runs around the campus in a hurry, with a look of excitement and eagerness on her face, as if she was chased by a dog. She seems to be the daughter of a professor named Lu. The teacher's eyes have a wise and deep light. Every time she looks at him, Yan Hui's heart is always beating fast. She knows why, but she must control herself. After all, she went to see the teacher this morning. At that time, she saw a junior girl who had just left the dormitory of the teacher's unit building. When did the girl go to see the teacher? There was a dance last night. Did the girl meet the teacher at the dance? Yan Hui also went to the dance. She was wearing a floral little white dress. A boy in a black shirt invited her to dance. The boy's name was Bai Shengtian. He said that he had liked Yan Hui for 3 years, but Yan Hui Mingming, I'm only a freshman, I'm laughing so hard. She turned around and didn't see the teacher. Did the teacher leave with the junior girl at that time? After all, this kind of dance can often bring together female students who are about to graduate and young and middle-aged teachers. Teacher, is that girl you met in Xiongbai Mountain my mother? I wrote her a letter yesterday, but I forgot to mention it. Yan Hui's tone was a little coquettish. She had no objection to the teacher's romanticism. How could a person like him not attract girls as colorful as butterflies to dance around him? Isn't she one of them? When Yan Hui met the teacher for the first time, he said that Yan Hui looked like a friend he had known before. This friend was a girl and lived in the same farmer's house as the teacher who went to the countryside. Later, the girl was transferred to the revolutionary camp. The committee is responsible for publicity work. This girl's experience was exactly the same as Yan Hui's mother. Her mother often told Yan Hui that she once knew a young man from Xiang University and wanted to go to the mountains and countryside with him to farm fields, pick tea, and fish. It's a pity that we are destined but not destined. Everyone in that era had to obey the collective arrangements before thinking about their own affairs. Yan Hui also had some impressions of Hunan University from the memories her mother recounted in detail, and finally applied for this school. Do you think I will remember you 20 years from now? The teacher did not answer Yan Hui's question directly, but just smiled. He always smiles, as if he has no sorrow, and no big thing can make his smile disappear. Yan Hui was embarrassed to answer this question. She said she didn't remember. She was a little reluctant. She said he must remember her, but she seemed a little pretentious. I definitely remember you and your name, but I don't remember the name of the girl I met back then. Do you know why? The teacher asked without raising his head while picking up the hoe. Why? Yan Hui blurted out, wanting to know the answer so much. The teacher's words also made her cheeks feel a little hot like the sunlight that was getting warmer at this time. Because I only remember the name of the beautiful girl. If you are so good looking, your mother must also be a great beauty. If it was your mother that I met back then, I will never forget it, the teacher explained. Yan Hui wanted to pooh-pooh him. The teacher always spoke so calmly and openly, as if teasing others, but it would not make people think that he was being a hooligan. Just kidding, you should write to your mother next time. Don't be impatient. I will plant 188 trees this year. Why 188? Auspicious. Puff. Mom, Lu Chang'an commented on my circle of friends. Yan Hui came to her senses, Lu Chang'an? She was already somewhat familiar with this name, and because of her teacher's relationship, she had some complicated emotions about it. When her daughter came home for the first time after going to college, she mentioned this name and talked about some things about Lu Chang'an, which made Yan Hui's heart ripple again. What did he say? Yan Hui smiled lightly. He said. Yan Qingcheng showed Lu Chang'an's comments to her mother. Yan Hui felt her heart tightening. What nonsense was this young man talking about? Lu Chang'an continued to walk to Lushan Mountain. He wanted to see Qinyanan and make preparations at her place. He wanted to change his face and clothes, and then go to see Yan Hui to reminisce about the past and chat. As for what I told Yan Qingcheng before, it doesn't matter that Lu Jianxi is dead. This is probably what people often call a reversal. When I arrived at Qinyanan's residence, I got out of the elevator and just walked into the living room. I saw Zhu Huntang rushing over like a madman, gnashing his teeth, dancing as if he wanted to fight Lu Chang'an, and roaring like a weak chicken. What's wrong with her? Lu Chang'an stretched out his hand to hold Zhu Huntang's head, and at the same time asked Qinyanan inexplicably, who was standing up with his hands on his lower back. She planned to skip class in the afternoon. She probably thought she was exposed. You came to catch her in class. She felt that she couldn't bear it anymore and had no hope for life, so she decided to fight with you. Qinyanan knew Zhu Huntang very well. Zhu Huntang was completely helpless with Lu Chang'an. With wealth, power, beauty, and bakers are of no use, so I have no choice but to go into battle myself. You ran to your counselor's house to skip class. You are so innovative and courageous in skipping class. Do you want me to admire you? Lu Chang'an said to Zhu Huntang, who was out of reach of Lu Chang'an's opponent and was trying hard to kick his legs. Zhu Huntang secretly cried out. It turned out that the bad old man was not here to catch her going to class, but she was reckless. If she had known better, she should have kept calm and left first with the excuse of going to class. After going down the mountain, she would transform and run happily on the green grassland. The little lamb fled away. No, I just thought you thought I was skipping class and felt wronged, so I launched a sad and angry attack. I will go back to class with you later. Countless flashes of light flashed in Zhu Huntang's brain, and he suddenly thought of Lu Chang'an going up the mountain at this point is probably because of something, and it is unlikely that he will go back to class with her. At that time, he can still go down the mountain on the pretext of going to class, and then transform into a clever little lamb running on the green grassland and escape. Well, that's pretty much it? Lu Chang'an nodded. He had just learned from Qinyanan that Zhu Huntang was going to skip class. He even had a feeling that his self-esteem was hurt. Someone dared to ignore him so much. He just beat her up in the morning. Damn, isn't it possible that he can't even coerce and tame a mere lamb now? He still had to go to class, so that was about the same. Lu Chang'an let go of Zhu Huntang and said to Qinyanan, last time I stayed here for the night, you prepared pajamas for me. I think you also have daily clothes, right? Yes, they are all placed in the guest room. Qinyanan was slightly curious and took 2 steps slowly, still pressing his palms on his lower back to remind him that he should express his concern for their mother and daughter. Lu Chang'an walked over and hugged his sister gently. Who said that her daughter was a caring person? It's obviously my sister. What are you going to do? Zhu Huntang grabbed his messy hair and came over curiously and eagerly. Lu Chang'an must be doing something fun, and Zhu Huntang must participate. Thank you for your support, thank you for your rewards and monthly votes, and I wish all bosses will always be awesome. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 858. Zhu Huntang summarized that there were 2 adventures that he and Lu Chang'an participated in together. The first one was to go to Gongjiaja to bring back the coffin, which contained Lu Chang'an's mother Shang Guandandan. In this adventure, the protagonists were himself and Lu Chang'an. Qin Yinan was involved, but he was basically just a vase. Apart from humming and coquettishly cooing in front of Lu Chang'an, there was no use for him. Zhu Huntang provided transportation and a lot of wisdom and analysis, and played a role that Qin Yinan could not match in bringing back Shang Guandandan for Lu Chang'an, a historical event recorded in the annals of history. The second adventurous incident, Night Interview with a Vampire, was even more sad and full of emotions. Not only was she forced to admit her status as his mount, but she also lost the chance to get big breasts. What's more important is that Zhu Huntang, working together with Lu Chang'an, he spit out the fountain of life and saved Mrs. Karnstein, the ancestor of vampires. In both incidents, Zhu Huntang played a vital role. She felt that if Lu Chang'an did not take her with him when he had fun things to do, he would be in trouble with himself and it would be unforgivable. You ask Qin Yinan for clothes, but the clothes you are wearing are neither damaged nor dirty, nor are they stained with a woman's fragrance that you need to clean off before a date. That means that when you change clothes, you must do something similar. It's about private visits in incognito, or other dress-up games. Zhu Huntang is always particularly alert at this time, and after calm analysis, he came to the conclusion, you must take me there, otherwise no one will advise you. You were so angry just now that you wanted to punch and kick me, but a minute later you think I have to take you to play. Lu Chang'an still hugged Qin Yinan and gently patted the caring little cotton-padded jacket's back. In contrast, he felt even more, the bamboo rafters were in tatters, and the holes for air leakage could not be plugged, and the seams could not be sewn properly. There is no overnight feud between the lovely granddaughter and the terrible grandfather. They reconciled immediately. Zhu Huntang didn't take it seriously and said sweetly, as a fairy, can't she even change her face? You need some face. Qin Yinan felt her brother's love and encouragement, bumped her chin on his shoulder, tilted her head and scolded Zhu Huntang with some pride. She doesn't always maintain a kind, loving, and tolerant stepmother mentality when facing Zhu Huntang. The two of them are best friends first. A best friend is someone who wants to scold you from time to time, and she is the one who scolds you whenever she wants. Zhu Huntang was very angry. It was clear that Qin Yinan was the shameless one. Zhu Huntang squeezed in between Qin Yinan and Lu Chang'an, pushed Qin Yinan away, then threw herself into Lu Chang'an's arms, reached out and grabbed his shoulders, raised his head and howled, "Bring it to me, I'm going. Take me there. Take me there." Qin Yinan didn't care, she just shook her head and frowned, as if she saw Lu Hanshan in the future pestering her father like this, being stupid and dumbfounded. Qin Yinan touched her belly, so she said it was very important for her to prepare a parenting plan and start prenatal education from now on, all in order to prevent Lu Chanchan from becoming the second sheep. Lu Chang'an pressed Zhu Huntang's forehead and pushed her away. He realized that Yan Hui had Yan Qingcheng with him, and it seemed that there would be no problem with him. "I'm not going to do anything fun today, I'm just going to meet Yan Qingcheng's mother. Her mother, Yan Hui, was once my student." Lu Chang'an had no intention of hiding anything from Zhu Huntang and Qin Yinan. Maybe one day, Qin Yinan can fully recover, or occasionally appear in front of him in a real Yesijin posture, and then he can be the same person he used to be to meet and accompany him like today. Yesijin did not become a completely annihilated wave in the long river of history, and Lu Chang'an did not lament that bluebirds do not convey foreign messages, and lilacs bear sorrow in the rain. This is what he is most grateful for, Shang Guandandan. So the little old lady today, acting wantonly and repeatedly trying to ride on Lu Chang'an's neck to restore her feudal status and style, Lu Chang'an also tolerated it. "Isn't this fun?" Zhu Huntang became excited. "Are you planning to use your identity as Lu Jianxi to soothe the empty and lonely mind and body of the young woman from Jiquang?" Lu Chang'an went to get a bundle of tape, sealed Zhu Huntang's mouth, and then stuck her next to the ceiling chandelier. Her whole body was illuminated brightly. He felt ashamed of his original thoughts. Yan Hui was bringing a daughter who looked like a little cotton-padded jacket. What was he bringing? It was so stupid that he still thought there was no problem. Lu Chang'an thought about himself for 10 seconds. "I'll put you down later." Qin Yinan suppressed a smile and said to Zhu Huntang gently. Zhu Huntang has always been a bit masochistic. The more Lu Chang'an treats her like this, the more she likes to be clingy to Lu Chang'an. This is consistent with her relationship with Lu Chang'an. Lu Chang'an's hidden relationship has nothing to do with it. Zhu Huntang couldn't move, so she decided to cry, using her tears to write hateful sentences on the floor, denounced the cruel Lu Chang'an. Qin Yinan followed Lu Chang'an into the guest room. Lu Chang'an was taking off his clothes with his back to her, his broad shoulders, strong back, tough and straight waist, and then exposed his full hip line and slender legs. His feet are on the ground, as if he is rooted in it. His back always gives people the feeling that the mountains and rivers are broken in front of him, and peace can be found behind him. Qin Yinan was a little shy, but still tried to look natural. She pursed her lips and ignored the pink on her cheeks, and took out her underwear and shoes first. "I don't have any clothes in the style of the 1980s or 1990s here," Qin Yinan said while looking through the wardrobe. Qin Yinan usually goes to the mall and looks at men's clothing. If there is something suitable for Lu Chang'an, she will buy it and bring it back. She also sends some clothes to Lu Chang'an's home. Just when sending clothes to Lu Chang'an's home, he would also know that some of the clothes were bought by Zhou Shuling. This little daughter-in-law was actually kind and considerate. Qin Yinan, while thanking Zhou Shuling for her brother, thought it would be better to prepare a separate wardrobe for Lu Chang'an at her own place to avoid her. The clothes given by him were mixed with those given by Zhou Shuling. He couldn't tell them apart, and he thought they were prepared by Zhou Shuling. Yan Hui doesn't know how to wear clothes from that era? Why should I wear clothes in the style of the 1980s and 1990s? Professor Lu will be fixed in that era after he died. Lu Chang'an did not change his underwear. He was a little confused that Qin Yinan had taken out his underwear, but he did not pay much attention to it. After all, Qin Yinan was a woman. Even as a younger sister, she subconsciously coveted his perfect physical appearance. It's tempting to attract people, so it's normal to accidentally reveal that you want to watch him change his underwear. He just changed into socks that matched his shoes, and then stood in front of the wardrobe with Qin Yinan to select them. He tapped his fingers on the clothes casually and was about to take them out, but Qin Yinan suppressed his fingers. Qin Yinan has a fragrant breath and stands very close to Lu Chang'an. Her long hair hanging on the temples is slightly curly, which makes her more charming, as if she is the kind of woman who has been gentle and considerate in her married life. It's not the feeling of an unmarried woman who is slightly unfamiliar and undecided in this situation. Oh, the word old husband and wife may be enough to describe it briefly. Qin Yinan ignored Lu Chang'an and decided on matching clothes for her. Yes, it is very suitable for an old man who has gone through many vicissitudes of life and has a slightly cynical feeling, but still retains a gentle and elegant temperament. Lu Chang'an nodded. He saw Qin Yinan open the display cabinet next to him, and there were several art-grade pieces in it. Lu Chang'an took one of his walking sticks. Qin Yinan was a little proud, but she didn't expect that he would still use the cane she prepared. This was just a matching accessory she thought of in a flash. She had watched some TV dramas of the Republic of China, and there were some young princes or warlords with canes in them. It seems a little frivolous. But her brother, Yechinayu, is a real noble son. He can control both his status and his personal temperament. What's more, she is sure that he will transform into an old man now. After changing clothes for Lu Chang'an, looking at his slightly unfamiliar appearance and temperament, and smelling his familiar smell, Qin Yinan's heart beat faster. She leaned in front of him, took out her phone and took a photo with him, feeling a sense of accomplishment. This is probably similar to how men like to dress women in various costumes that arouse desire, Except that Qin Yanan and Lu Chang'an have no further programs. Zhou Shuling often buys clothes for you. Will she ask you to change them for her every time she buys them? Zhou Shuling and Qin Yanan have a good relationship. Qin Yanan often visits Zhou Shuling's circle of friends, but Lu Chang'an is in Zhou Shuling's circle of friends. I haven't been out of the country too frequently, let alone photos of the scene just now. Just because Qin Yanan took a photo, he didn't post it on WeChat Moments. After all, after reading it, there were people who spread the news and stirred up trouble on both sides, and even on three sides. Qin Yanan wasn't targeting him either. Bamboo hoontang attached to the ceiling. It is a wonderful thing to see your beloved brother in other people's circle of friends. Sometimes it feels very complicated, and sometimes it is very comfortable and warm. For example, in Shangguan Dandan's circle of friends, Lu Chang'an fell into a snow pit. The photo of rolling was also attached with a video of Shangguan Dandan reciting the Sapphire Case UN11. Zhou Shuling is not deceived by my beauty like you. A person like her is very simple-minded, but in fact she is very determined. She has a clear understanding of public order, good customs and ethics and the thought of consciously safeguarding them. Even if she does not consciously appreciate my charm, but not go beyond it, which will make her conscience uneasy, and her shame will restrain all her impulses. Lu Chang'an understood the deeper meaning of Qin Yanan's words, and of course he wanted to protect Zhou Shuling. Do you feel so good about her? Qin Yanan opened his mouth in shock, his eyes filled with disbelief. To say such words in the mouth of his brother who rarely praised others was the highest recognition Qin Yanan had ever received. No wonder Qin Yanan always felt that Lu Chang'an was a little too kind to Zhou Shuling and her children. It turned out that the two of them had a very strong affection for each other and were in a platonic spiritual love, right? As for Qin Yanan being deceived by beauty, and even implying that Qin Yanan was unable to extricate herself, regardless of shame, and repeatedly impulsively tried to cross the bottom line of public order, good customs and ethics, Qin Yanan didn't care. Because that's what Lu Chang'an is like. He said these words that touched people's hearts. It didn't amount to ridicule or opposition, it was just an objective description. After all, if he really felt disgusted, Qin Yanan had no chance to overcome it. If she can transcend, if she can be impulsive without shame, it must be because he doesn't care, or he can tolerate it. Who makes her the special person? I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 859. Lu Chang'an's back was turned to Qin Yanan, and his whole abdomen was slightly bulging, giving the appearance of an old man's saggy skin, but he felt that it was not necessary. In Yan Hui's eyes, he should still be tall and straight, with an elegant posture. A strong feeling. There is no need to deliberately leave traces of time on yourself, which will only increase the sadness of a middle-aged woman. Women are always more sensitive to the plain and ruthless changes of time. I often say that Zhou Shuling is average-looking and beautiful in mind. In fact, I may not mean to praise her. We often praise a person for his commendable spirit, interesting thoughts, noble soul, pure heart, etc. The objects of these compliments can be anything. Blame it on the performance of what the brain is thinking. Thinking beautifully is my greatest compliment to her. Lu Chang'an looked back at Qin Yanan. You also think beautiful, but your figure and appearance are too outstanding. Let people ignore your mind, soul, heart, and spirit. It sounds like he feels very good about Zhou Shuling, but he seems to feel better about Qin Yanan. Qin Yanan doesn't mind being a little sentimental at this time, and this may not even mean being sentimental. After all, in addition to thinking pretty like Zhou Shuling, she always has more advantages in figure and appearance. For example, she has more fat to shape the position where he can focus his eyes. She is also taller and matches him well. Unlike Zhou Shuling, who is much shorter than him, it is very difficult to stand on tiptoe when kissing, not to mention 33333. Qin Yanan has no experience and does not know much about it. She has basic skills. Something I just heard about. What are you thinking about? Lu Chang'an felt that the blush on Qin Yinan's face was a bit suspicious. Have a bee in one's bonnet. Seeing it, Lu Chang'an nodded, and then came to the mirror to adjust his appearance. Qin Yinan watched the changes in Lu Chang'an's face curiously, as if he was adjusting the image with computer software. His hands were flapping and pinching, and the appearance of his face kept changing. He pressed his nose and rubbed his fingers upwards from the wings of his nose, making the whole nose taller. He pulled the corners of his eyes, and the sparkle and brightness of the young man's eyes disappeared, and they were narrow and slightly cold. The cheeks were also thinner, and the hairline receded slightly. At this time, he stopped moving, nodded with satisfaction, and touched his cheeks, which made the young man's fair skin darker. Qin Yinan feels like he is now like the young man named Lu Chang'an who was deprived of decades of time in a trance. He has not aged much, but he has the feeling of being tempered by the years. Normally speaking, shouldn't Professor Lu be older? At least he has some white hair and so on, and he is the kind of elegant old man with a strong spirit. Qin Yinan took 2 steps back in confusion. His image became unfamiliar, but his breath still, it didn't make Qin Yinan feel alienated. She remembered the time Lu Chang'an broke into her bedroom pretending to be Ma Weiming and she almost shot him. In his long life, impersonating others should be something he often did, but she didn't know if he had ever impersonated someone else's husband. Lovers and the like have a one-night fling with those women. Qin Yinan didn't think that Lu Chang'an would do this intentionally, but sometimes in this situation, it was inevitable to make mistakes and had to go with the flow. It is not normal for Professor Lu, who is rumored to have passed away, to appear on the campus of Hunan University again. Lu Chang'an's vocal cords also became more generous, and his voice was slightly deeper. This sound was like massaging the ears. Qin Yinan felt that whether intentionally or unintentionally, he was enhancing his masculine charm. Perhaps it is because it is difficult for him to leave heirs, so he always enhances his masculine charm in such details to make more women flock to him, thereby increasing the number of reproduction behaviors and thereby increasing the chance of leaving heirs. Probability. Thinking about it this way, it cannot be said that he always lingers in the flowers. There are too many warblers and swallows around him. After all, the deepest and most instinctive desire of a male creature is to leave heirs. But it is obvious that he already has 2 offspring. Qin Yinan touched his belly. He must find a way to take care of his affairs in the future. He cannot expand the scale without limit. The woman who is now unclearly involved with him enough is enough. Wait a minute, where do you plan to meet? Qin Yinan asked with concern. Lu Chang'an said huh, and looked back at Qin Yinan. He had not considered such a detailed issue. She seemed to have something to raise. That's not, it's just a human being. There is a saying that a little separation is better than a newlywed. What's more, you haven't seen each other for so long, will you feel uncomfortable? You always need a private occasion. Zhu Huntang's factory building modification. You can enter the lounge by entering the door lock code, which is 123456. Qin Yinan had to help him consider this issue. Professor Lu was also a popular figure in Xiangdali back then. I don't know how many men, women, and children fell in love with him. He appeared on the campus of Xiang University again. It would be fine if he was just passing by and staying for a short time. If he and Yan Hui took a memory trip and walked around, maybe they would meet many acquaintances. With Lu Chang'an's character, he probably wouldn't care about the impact of the resurrection of the dead, and would probably greet those old friends with horrified and distorted faces with a smile. But Qin Yinan must help him consider this, even if it makes it easier for him and Yan Hui to make fire or something. After all, Yan Hui didn't give Qin Yinan much sense of threat. Some of the female students Professor Lu met when he was on the Hunan University campus are now only in their 30s. This kind of woman in her 30s may now be a beautiful professor at Hunan University. If she is still single, she may be emotionally unstable and unable to control her feelings. If she accidentally gets into trouble, she will be in trouble. Why is the password so simple? Lu Chang'an frowned. It was as simple as Zhu Huntang's simple mind. Actually, the password system was originally unable to set such a simple password. Zhu Huntang refused to set a complex password by herself, and asked people to change the system program to allow the setting of simple passwords. Qin Yinan touched her belly and sighed. She thinks the password system, it was disrespectful to refuse her to set a simple password. At that time, she yelled at the door for a long time and hit it several times with a hammer, but she didn't damage the door, and ordinary bombs couldn't destroy it. After listening to Qin Yinan's story, Lu Chang'an felt no guilt at all about sticking Zhu Huntang on the ceiling. When I leave later, you can put her down to prevent her from catching up and causing trouble again, Lu Chang'an said. Qin Yinan nodded and tugged at Lu Chang'an's sleeve shyly. Brother, who is more beautiful, me or Yan Hui? At home, Qin Yinan was wearing a thin silk dress. The soft fabric caressed her graceful body like running water. The hem of the skirt swayed under her hip line, making the light seem to be distorted. The shyness in her eyebrows was a little more artificial, but she looked even more adorable. A woman who had lived by his side since she was a child would naturally be influenced by the breath of extraordinary creatures when she grew up. Lu Chang'an pinched her cheeks, and used both hands to he held it up, looked at it twice, and said with a smile, "Didn't I tell you, you are the most beautiful woman in thousands of years?" Qin Yinan was satisfied and shy, put his hands on the hip line to press the skirt, and twisted his body. Although his most beautiful woman may include other people, women just like to listen to sweet words, but have little interest in pursuing the truth. Lu Chang'an walked out of the guest room and saw Zhu Huntang twisting her head stiffly and adjusting her eyes to the ground. He didn't know what she was doing and left without asking. When Zhu Huntang saw that Lu Chang'an had abandoned her and was not going to take her out to play, he immediately yelled, but without letting the cruel old man stop at all, he started to yell at Qin Yinan, scolding her for being unfaithful. She is Lu Chang'an's little bitch who is acting as an accomplice to the tiger. She even pouts at Qin Yinan, as if she doesn't realize that only Qin Yinan can put her down now. As Lu Chang'an went down the mountain, he contacted Yan Qingcheng. He did not change his contact information deliberately. Yan Qingcheng would definitely be a little confused that Professor Lu Jianxi wanted to meet his mother. Why was it Lu Chang'an who was inquiring, arranging, and contacting, but in the end he never expected that Lu Chang'an was Lu Jianxi. And so on. Human thinking will always be bound by common sense. The restraint of common sense on thinking is not entirely negative. It also has a great protective effect, allowing human beings to maintain a stable state both physically and psychologically. Many people who are not restrained by common sense die early, and or become a psychopath. Zhu Huntang is not bound by common sense, so if one day she truly accepts from her heart that she becomes a sheep, and all human speech, behavior, and thinking characteristics disappear, Lu Chang'an will not be surprised. Looking at her daughter and then at Su Mei's daughter, Lu Chang'an compared them from an angle that had nothing to do with him. He looked at the message Yan Qingcheng sent him and sighed at 19 decibels. A person's appearance will greatly affect a person's thoughts and emotions. For example, many people put on a new set of clothes, an aristocratic boy got co-branded sneakers, and in such situations, they will become more confident. Lu Chang'an's current condition is just like plastic surgery. Many young people now confidently participate in various talent shows after plastic surgery. Even if many people think he looks weird, he still feels good about himself. Of course Lu Chang'an is not more confident, whether it is college student Lu Chang'an or old Professor Lu Jianxi, they are both confident and handsome men. He had already adapted to the state after being completely changed. After slightly adjusting his mentality to adapt to his current appearance, he felt nothing else. Until he walked into the campus and found Lu Yuwang sneaking behind him. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Siahua. Chapter 860. Many ancient poems and articles often say that March is warm in spring, with warm winds, warm water in the spring river, and so on. This is often just because of the climate when the poet was writing. Even lychees could be grown in the Yellow River Basin, or it was the gap between the major and minor ice ages. Like today's March, apart from an Nuan's name, it really has nothing to do with Nuan. Lu Yuang was wearing a cheongsam, feeling that her fair and delicate calves were cold, and her semi-transparent flesh-colored stockings were still hanging down a little. She couldn't roll up her cheongsam and pull it up, but she regretted not putting on a sling in the morning. It's too cold today. Under normal circumstances, Lu Yuang would not wear stockings when wearing a cheongsam. Doesn't a cheongsam look good only if it exposes a section of its long white legs? After all, I'm getting older and I can't bear the cold. When I went out in the morning, Lu Yuang saw An Nuan actually thought the weather was good today, so he planned to go out wearing a short skirt and half socks, but Lu Yuang caught him and brought her back to change. She was allowed to go out only after putting on her stockings. Of course, no matter how cold the weather is now, it can't stop Professor Liu's fiery heart. At the end of the morning class, I praised two students, but they climbed up the pole and had to take a photo with Lu Yuang. It's very common for students to take photos with professors, especially for a famous professor like her. Of course, Professor Liu's fame has nothing to do with her professional abilities. Lu Yuang's classroom video on demand is the best in the school, and some video courses are also selling very well. Under such circumstances, Lu Yuang feels that he still needs to maintain a friendly image. Whenever students ask for a photo or something, he is willing to cooperate. Who told her that she had just bought a Porsche and was in a hurry to regain her blood? After eating at noon and taking a nap, Lu Yuang was going back to the research room to prepare courseware. As a famous professor, Lu Yuang's treatment in the school was still very good. Unlike many teachers who do not have offices or research rooms, you have to take your work home and do it. As soon as he reached the intersection of Orange Garden Community and Fallen Street, Lu Yuang saw a familiar face. Degenerate Street is an older name. This small street is basically parallel to the Xiangjiang River. In the past, it was mainly lined with some small hotels and low-priced rental houses, as well as a variety of cheap snacks, which was very suitable for student consumption. In that era, when going in and out of billiard rooms, game halls, and video parlors was considered degenerate, this small street full of entertainment venues was naturally called Degenerate Street. You must know that at that time, Hunan University would be severely punished if they did not go to bed on time. Warning: any bets placed while playing cards will result in probation. This street was originally owned entirely by local farmers. After reconstruction, it is now called Lushan Commercial Civilization Street, which is completely opposite to its previous name. Lu Yuang was deeply impressed by this street. She has been wandering on this street since elementary school. It is not that Lu Yuang was interested in the entertainment here when she was a primary school student and junior high school student, but because the snacks on the street are so delicious. Very cheap. She has never been short of pocket money since she was a child, and she loves to eat, so it is normal for her to be reluctant to stay here. After returning from Linan last year, Lu Yuang began to recall every detail of his childhood, searching for the impression of Lu Jianxi in his memory at that time, and finally found passages related to Lu Jianxi in his childhood diary. It turned out that the first time I met Lu Jianxi when I was a child was on Sinking Street. There was a fight in a billiard hall. I and my father went to watch the excitement. My father said that the fighting party was 3 teachers from Hunan University, Lu Jian, Ren Changhong, and Su Zhancheng. The 3 middle-aged teachers were still fighting in such a place where young people gathered together, which left a deep impression on Lu Yuang. When Lu Yuang came home, he happily wrote a diary about the interaction between teachers and students. Lu Yuang has completely forgotten this matter until now. Like many people, when he looks through the diary of his childhood, he often feels at a loss. Have you done this before? The diary gave her the key to some memories. The picture she opened was blurry after all, but the Lu Jianxi in front of her was clear. Reflecting the face in her memories, they gradually overlapped and became clearer and more impressive. She couldn't help but feel a little with emotion. After so many years, time seems to have passed by him without leaving a trace. There was no time to lament the spring and autumn, so Lu Yuwang cautiously followed Lu Jianxi. After Lu Yuwang came back from Linen, he began to search for some information related to Lu Jianxi. Hunan University was the institution where Lu Jianxi worked. There was very little basic relevant information, but Lu Yuwang still found out a lot about Lu Jianxi's life. Work-related information. At least Lu Yuwang was so impressed by his face that he was able to recognize it at a glance today. Another thing that made Lu Yuwang notice him was that handsome guys were common, but old handsome guys who were over 1.8 meters tall were very rare. This old handsome guy is also wearing very tasteful, brand-name suits and shirts, and Ferragamo leather shoes, looking like an enhanced version of Wu Xiaobo. There just aren't that many gray hairs. There were rumors that Lu Jianxi was dead. Lu Yuwang didn't believe such rumors until he saw him reappearing on the campus of Hunan University. Her suspicions started after the incident where she and Professor Ling returned to being young girls together. Now was not the time to clarify his thoughts and conduct further analysis. Lu Yuwang just wanted to keep an eye on Lu Jianxi and prepare to wait for the opportunity. Lu Yuwang sneered, leaned against the cement wall covered with ivy vines, took out his cell phone, dialed a number, and turned off the phone. Frowning his brows, Lu Yuwang tapped his finger on his chest, sneered again, and actually turned off his phone. That means there are no 300 taels of silver here. So Lu Yuwang became more cautious and vigilant. Looking at Lu Jianxi's back from a distance, he felt more and more that this leisurely walking posture looked very much like that man, En Nuan's boyfriend. Why is it strange that his son walks like his father? If I question him about this, he will definitely answer like this. He. Lu Chang'an put his hands in his pockets. The corner of his eye had already locked on Lu Yuwang. The picture in the corner of ordinary people's eyes was always blurry. Lu Chang'an did not have such a flaw. He could still freely adjust his eyes when he turned to the corner of his eyes. Focusing on her, she saw that Professor Liu's 8-centimeter cheongsam slit on her knees was stretched out because of her nervous posture. The first time he saw her, he naturally turned off his phone. He knew very well that in Lu Yuwang's series of operations of rejuvenating her youth and regaining her youth, he was not without flaws. Lu Yuwang would inevitably think that since he could change her appearance, has your appearance changed? Could that uncle be a certain kind of face of his? Rather than simply saying that a young man pretended to be an old man to tease her? Lu Chang'an sighed softly. Should he go around behind her while she wasn't paying attention, knock her out and send her back? Forget it. Lu Chang'an ignored Lu Yuwang, who was following him, and walked directly to Zhu Huntang's residence. He sent the location to Yan Qingcheng and planned to meet there. Meetings arranged by old friends always make people full of expectations. The excited emotions in the body are like opening a bottle of mellow old wine. After pouring it into the mouth, the hot taste makes people close their eyes tightly and say tisk hard. Full of aftertaste. As for after meeting each other, I suddenly realized another feeling, whether it was more intense than I imagined, or whether I suddenly realized that it was not the beauty of the past, but had become dull and indifferent, that is another matter. Lu Chang'an walked to the agreed place and saw Yan Qingcheng and Yan Hui already standing there. The spring breeze in March was pulling her hair. The girl who planted the sycamore tree with him back then was still standing under the sycamore tree. But the liveliness and innocence of a girl are no longer in her face, and there are many more marks of time. The corners of her mouth twitched slightly, not knowing whether she wanted to smile to her old friend or say a few words. Under her daughter's gaze, Yan Hui clenched her hands. She impulsively wanted to rush over and talk to her. The teacher who had admired him hugged her, but he put down his heels reservedly and took a step forward slowly. After all, his eyes were blurred and he couldn't see the person in front of him clearly. This kind of blur makes people feel panicked, as if the face he saw clearly just now was just a scene in an ordinary dream or fantasy. I quickly wiped away my tears, and his appearance became clear again, vividly in front of my eyes. That kind of fear, the panic that he saw, was just an illusion finally dissipated. Teacher Yan Hui said with all his strength. The teacher in front of him was no different from 20 years ago. He was just dressed a little better. Thinking that he had not endured hardship in these years, Yan Hui breathed a sigh of relief and was pleased. Incessantly. If the teacher was also secretly persecuted, then today's meeting would probably make Yan Hui's tears more bitter. But at this moment, she was crying and then started laughing. Today's reunion would probably only be filled with joy, but not. He poured out his sorrow and sorrow. Little Yezi, long time no see. Lu Chang'an looked at Yan Hui and said. He looked up at the sky. Even in the cold season, women still like to wear thin clothes, but the cold is uncomfortable after all. They may have read the weather forecast today and knew that the temperature will rise a little in the afternoon. At this time, a ray of sunshine leaked out from behind the clouds, making the chill in the spring breeze recede slightly. Yan Hui stood under the sycamore tree. The ray of sunshine did not fall on her, but only coated the crisp and tender sycamore leaves with a halo. Her body was a little thin, not even as plump as it used to be. Thinking about it over the years, she was not having a good life, but she still exuded a stubborn and strong temperament. It was her most attractive trait back then, and it was also passed down to the daughter who is now around her. Hearing the nickname from back then, the strangeness and alienation between the two people, brought about by the long absence of each other, finally disappeared. The reserved and proud posture that a mother used to show in front of her daughter also showed signs of falling apart. She seemed to have returned to the state of mind she had when facing her teacher. The body seems to be a little lighter, and it can jump on tiptoes. The angle of the mouth is no longer deliberately controlled. Even the stiff nose has learned to wrinkle cutely again, and the eyes will open wider. Some, regaining the light they had when looking at him. Yan Qingcheng could feel the changes in her mother. When Professor Lu called out her mother's nickname when she was a girl, her mother's temperament became completely different, as if she had hidden the girl Yan Hui in her heart and came out again at this moment. My mother will inevitably grow old, but she went back in time when facing him. Yan Qingcheng also understood that her mother often talked about things about Hunan University at home, and her indifferent appearance was just a disguise. My mother also warned herself not to fall in love on the university campus, especially not to fall into a teacher-student relationship. However, if my mother could return to the campus of her youth, she would still fall in love with Professor Lu without hesitation, right? Even though her mother always said that she was full of respect for Professor Lu, it was the admiration of a student for a close teacher, but now looking at her mother, even Yan Qingcheng, who doesn't understand love, will feel the overflowing love. Attachment and admiration are not just respect and admiration. This situation is similar to what happened to Lu Chang'an. For example, the girl named Bai Hui always approached Lu Chang'an intentionally or unintentionally under the guise of a friend. She said that she was just a friend, but she waved her little hoe in her heart. At the speed of light. Yan Qingcheng looked at the elegant and handsome Professor Lu in front of her, and then looked at the house next to her. This was where Zhu Huntang rested between classes at Hunan University, and Yan Qingcheng also taught Zhu Huntang here. The meeting between Professor Lu and his mother was arranged here. Indeed, as Zhu Huntang said, they are family friends. The location of this house is quiet and it is not easy to be disturbed. Yan Qingcheng realized that he was disturbing their reunion now. People. Although she was full of curiosity about Professor Lu and still had many questions in her heart, Yan Qingcheng still slowly stepped back and prepared to leave. Now that her mother and Professor Lu had met again, should she go to class? I had already asked for leave today, but I had better go to class in the afternoon. With a smile on her face, Yan Qingcheng tiptoed back, preparing to contact Zhu Huntang and go to class together. When the teacher talked about some difficulties and key points in class, Yan Qingcheng also you can explain it to Zhu Huntang in more detail. After pushing behind the sycamore tree, Professor Lu and her mother could no longer be seen. Yan Qingcheng turned around and saw a slightly familiar and beautiful figure walking hurriedly. "Professor Lu, are you okay?" The figure staggered and fell. It was normal for someone with 10-centimeter high heels to fall down while walking in such a hurry. Yan Qingcheng hurriedly walked over to help Lu Yuwang up. "Although I have chosen one of Lu Yuwang's courses this semester, but have not taken it yet, Yan Qingcheng still knows this professor who is famous in the school. She is so beautiful and has a great figure. She is the envy of Hunan University. One of 3 pairs of beautiful legs. Lu Yuwang, Qin Yinan, and An Nuan, these 3 people have really good-looking legs. Yan Qingcheng is tall among girls, but her legs are not as long as theirs. Their leg shapes also symbolize the 3 types of legs. The most beautiful extreme of style. I'm fine, I was just passing by here, I was thinking about things seriously and didn't pay attention to my surroundings." Lu Yuwang endured the embarrassment and quickly explained tactfully, implying that he had not discovered the date between Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui. Yan Qingcheng had better not meddle in other people's business and leave quickly, so as not to interfere with Lu Yuwang's important affairs. "Your feet are not sprained, are they? Shall I take you to the infirmary?" Yan Qingcheng said worriedly. She had never worn high heels. Such 10-centimeter high heels were a bit unbelievable to Yan Qingcheng. Professor Lu was originally is she very tall and wearing such high heels to make all the men who try to get close to her look inferior to her? "Thank you, I'm fine, I'm leaving." After Lu Yuwang finished speaking, he twisted his waist and walked away quickly. After all, she is someone who has taken facial cream, and her body function is very good. Even if she sprains a little, her feet are not easily injured. Yan Qingcheng saw that there was nothing wrong with Lu Yuwang's hurried steps, so she stopped meddling in other people's business. She just felt a little emotional that An Nuan had completely inherited Lu Yuwang's beauty and figure. Why was she so little behind compared to her mother? Otherwise, I should be a school beauty comparable to Zhu Huntang and An Nuan. This was really a boring thought. Yan Qingcheng shook her head. Perhaps it was because she was not as good-looking as Zhu Huntang and An Nuan that she calmed down when facing Lu Chang'an and did not have any wild ideas about what he would like himself, and then gave birth to some charming responses. Lu Chang'an already has at least 2 women, Qin Yinan and An Nuan, as well as some who are waving small hose at the speed of light. Yan Qingcheng doesn't want to join in the fun, but she is very grateful to Lu Chang'an for knowing her for so long, even though she always shows her face from time to time. Although she wanted to keep a distance from him, he still took care of and helped her intentionally or unintentionally. Thinking about these, Yan Qingcheng looked at the messages on her mobile phone. After Lu Chang'an arranged for his father to meet her mother, he stopped sending messages to Yan Qingcheng. Yan Qingcheng hesitated for a moment, but still sent a message. "They met and I went back to class." No messages were replied immediately, and Yan Qingcheng was used to it. In daily social interactions, he always gave people a feeling of arrogance and indifference, but when they really talked face to face, he didn't feel this way at all. She hoped that Lu Chang'an would go to class in the afternoon. Yan Qingcheng also wanted to chat with him about why Professor Lu was rumored to have passed away, and Lu Chang'an usually said that he was an orphan. Watching Yan Qingcheng leave, Lu Yuwang tiptoed again and turned around carefully. The vegetation in this place was dense, and it was easy to step on the dirt. Her stiletto heels would dig into the soil and be difficult to pull out. She hid behind the sycamore tree, turned on her phone, and revealed the phone's lens little by little. What she captured was that Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui were no longer where they were. Lu Yuwang's eyes fell on the large house converted from a factory in front of her. The female teachers gossiped about Zhu Huntang's wealth, what good cars he had ridden in, what luxury goods he had used, what bags he had carried, and they also talked about Zhu Huntang's modified house. This lounge. It was really luxurious to prepare such a residence just for rest between classes. Lu Yuwang ran over and stood at the door with a sigh. Lu Yuwang stared at the password unlocking panel at the door. The password input interface popped up with a light touch. Lu Yuwang couldn't help but took a breath. Why is there such a complicated password input interface? Normally, Lu Yuwang has only seen the password interface of 0-9, and the maximum number of asterisks and hashes is added, but there are English letters on this interface, as well as complex patterns that are randomly refreshed, and strings that keep jumping. I don't know what it is. What to do? 1 2 3 4 5 6, Lu Yuwang didn't bother to worry about it, so he casually pressed his commonly used password. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 861. The door didn't open. Lu Yuwang frowned. Just when she was thinking about trying 66 or 68, she saw a line of words displayed on the door lock panel. The maximum number of people who can enter has been reached. If you need to increase the number, you can enter. The maximum number of people, please enter the secondary password. After Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui entered, the maximum number of people allowed to enter was reached. Lu Yuwang lamented Zhu Huntang's extravagance and corruption again. Damn capitalists, how hated they are. No wonder after Zhu Huntang's final exam results came out last semester, in an informal vote, many teachers voted to persuade Zhu Jun to be dismissed. Tang. Except for the turbulent years, there is no student in Hunan University who is more outrageous than Zhu Huntang. Lu Chang'an is also quite outrageous, but his academic performance is not as outrageous as Zhu Huntang's. Even though he frequently skips classes, his test scores are still at the level of a top student, haha, of course. Lu Yuwang's mind returned to the secondary password, and she continued to enter 123,456 cautiously. The door opened. Lu Yuwang was a little surprised. It seemed that although Zhu Huntang's academic performance was not good, she was smart enough. Her password interface was so complicated that it must be extremely difficult to crack, but she did the opposite and set up 123,456 is a moderately complex password. Even if someone is as smart as Lu Yuwang and solves the first code, when faced with the second code, he will definitely think that the second code must be much more complicated. It is difficult to use reverse thinking like Lu Yuwang. Crack. Zhu Huntang is not simple. Lu Yuwang sighed that Zhu Huntang was as smart and sharp as himself as he walked into the door. The door made a steady and slightly exciting locking sound, giving people a strong sense of security. Lu Yuwang felt that this door might not be able to be blown open with a bomb, and now he was going to catch Lu Jianxi in the urn. When you walk into the door, the first thing that catches your eye is the landscape area. In front of two transparent floor-to-ceiling glass windows is the forest landscape area. Beautifully made decorative mushrooms are everywhere. The lush trees are scattered at different heights, colorful, and the flowers and crystals are everywhere. Flowers decorate it. In the middle of a forest as beautiful as a fairy tale, there is a square tatami with crowns, gems, magic wands, huge rings, etc. that amaze women. In such a scene, even if a magic portal suddenly appeared and a fairy walked out and stood on the tatami, Lu Yuwang would not be surprised. She couldn't help but walk towards the tatami, and then she remembered that she was sneaking in or following and investigating, and she was not just coming to play in someone else's house. Lu Yuwang walked softly and observed the surroundings. He raised his ears but did not hear any sound. The house was very big. Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui came in a while before him. He should have distanced himself from them. As long as he was careful, then it will not be easy for them to discover. It seems that Yan Hui and Lu Jianxi reunited after many years. Originally, Yan Qingchen was still with her. Lu Yuwang didn't think much about it, but Yan Qingchen took the initiative to leave. Yan and Lu had a tacit understanding and did not hold back at all. Let Yan Qingchen leave, and then began to live alone in a room alone. What will they do? Will you do it? Lu Yuwang was not sure, and she didn't want anything to happen to Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui. After all, she was here to follow and investigate. What if she was peeping when they were doing that kind of thing? Or leave? If you peek, it's a bit perverted and immoral. But I am not willing to leave. After the firewood of reunion after a long separation is burned out, the two of them may talk about some things from the past, but Lu Yuwang is more concerned about it. In fact, Lu Yuwang was only more concerned about what happened back then. Her focus was to verify Lu Jianxi's true identity. Lu Yuwang wandered around the first floor and did not find Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui. When she came to the second floor, she was not so careful with her steps. She was a little impatient. The renovation of this factory building is so wild that the doors in some places are not visible at all. They will open automatically when you approach them, otherwise you will not be able to find them at all. Some walls have to be pushed hard to find that there is a room behind the wall. Some places that looked like doors, pushed open, revealed a huge portrait of Zhu Huntang. Lu Yuwang also tried to enter some rooms that were accidentally pushed open. The sound insulation effect inside was very good, so she was sure that now even if Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui were shaking in the next room, Lu Yuwang would be hard-pressed to spot them. It was impossible for Lu Yuwang to push down walls and partitions whenever she saw them, so after walking around the second floor, she still couldn't find Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui. After wandering around, Lu Yuwang felt a little tired, so he poured a glass of wine irritably and went to the landscape area on the first floor. Forget it, take a rest first. While Lu Yuwang was drinking, he walked to the tatami in the center of the fairy tale forest and sat down. This corrupt capitalist had so many shiny things. After drinking the wine, Lu Yuwang lay down comfortably. Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui must have been making trouble. Even if he found the room where they were, could he still break in? It's better to wait for them to come out and wait for the opportunity to take action. Lu Yuwang's lying posture was natural and elegant. She stretched out her hand, and suddenly a stream of sticky glue shot down from her head, touching Lu Yuwang's palm to the tatami. Ah! Lu Yuwang screamed, and used his other hand to pull the glue, but another stream of glue shot down from his head, sticking Lu Yuwang's two hands together. What is it? Lu Yuwang was surprised. These sticky glues looked a bit like the things sprayed by the little spiders in the movie. They were thick but had the feeling of intertwined fine fibers, full of stickiness and toughness. No matter Lu Yu, no matter how hard I tried, my hands just couldn't break free. Before she could dance, two more sticks of glue stuck Lu Yuwang's legs to the tatami. Oops! Lu Yuwang could only twist his waist and butt now, and he was like an insect whose wings were stuck after being pranked by a primary school student. But she didn't dare to twist around randomly, it was pointless and might attract a sticky attack. Zhu Huntang actually set up a cunning and treacherous trap in such a fairy tale atmosphere. Lu Yuwang did not overestimate Zhu Huntang. But why did Zhu Huntang set such a trap? Was this trap triggered automatically, or was it initiated manually? If it was artificially activated, did Lu Jianxi find himself and observe him with a surveillance camera in a corner? Thinking of this, Lu Yuwang quickly clamped his legs to avoid being exposed. Fortunately, the slit of the cheongsam he wore today was not too high. If he had secretly worn the cheongsam that Lu Chang'an made for An Nuan, he would have been exposed by now. "Help!" Lu Yuwang shouted in a low voice. Of course, there was no response. The rooms here are very well soundproofed. Lu Yuwang suspected that Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui were having a fierce fire. Lu Yuwang was not found at all, and it was impossible for him to have time to observe her. Then this trap was automatically triggered. In this situation, it's really frustrating every day. Fortunately, Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui can't just spend one day and one night. Lu Yuwang will still be found later. He would not be abandoned here to die, and his life was not in danger. Lu Yuwang felt a little relieved, but he just felt that it would be very embarrassing when he was discovered, and he had to find some excuse to explain. Anyway, they didn't know they were being followed, so they just said they found this place accidentally tried the password, accidentally broke into play, and that was it. Hey, when I was a girl, I often got into trouble. I don't know if they would believe me if I give such a reason now. Lu Yuwang was lying here, thinking that she would follow Lu Jianxi today. In the final analysis, it was because Lu Chang'an used the identity of an old man to chat with her, about Li Xiao. Thinking of this, Lu Yuwang felt a little aggrieved. When he was rescued, in this aggrieved mood, could he confidently take some more facial cream to compensate for himself? After suffering so many grievances, it was all because of him. It was hard for Lu Chang'an to say anything to her, right? While Lu Yuwang was thinking wildly, he tried to struggle with his hands and feet while minimizing body movements. However, these adhesives might be some high-tech products. Lu Yuwang saw that those adhesives actually knew how to penetrate the surface of the tatami and penetrate into the tatami. The bottom layer, firmly grasping the tatami floor, is extremely strong. After struggling like this for a while, she felt even more tired than usual from dancing. Lu Yuwang felt a little exhausted mentally and physically. After shouting a few times, she closed her eyes. I don't know how long it took, but Lu Yuwang felt someone pushing him. He opened his eyes in a daze, only to find Lu Jianxi and Yan Hui standing beside him. Are you done? Lu Yuwang blinked his eyes, shook his head, and asked a little not soberly. The room was as warm as a May day, and Lu Yuwang actually felt like sleeping very comfortably. Ah, Yan Hui raised her hands to cover her face, and took a step back. She was already feeling guilty. Lu Yuwang's sudden words made Yan Hui's cheeks turn red, but she still rationally felt that Lu Yuwang could not have said anything right. I just didn't understand Lu Yuwang's correct meaning. Lu Chang'an frowned. He originally knew that Lu Yuwang was following, but he didn't expect that she would enter the house. Zhu Huntang, this stupid sheep, said a password so simple that even someone like Lu Yuwang could crack it. What are you doing here? Lu Chang'an asked. He was not worried about Lu Yuwang's nonsense, saying that Lu Jianxi was Lu Chang'an. At least Lu Yuwang would not say it in front of Yan Hui. Lu Yuwang is thin-skinned and loves face. She has always regarded the matter of online dating as a shame. She only investigates in secret, and even refuses to ask Lu Chang'an directly about relevant questions and verifications. No. I didn't do anything, I wandered here and saw this house. I didn't expect that although the password was cleverly designed, it could still be cracked by me. Having said this, Lu Yuwang was still a little proud. When I was watching the movie, I saw those female agents and hackers cracking some security system, and I thought they were cool. You Lu Yuwang? Yan Hui recognized her at this time, feeling as happy as meeting an old friend, even though she was not actually familiar with Lu Yuwang. Lu Yuwang couldn't move and just nodded with some embarrassment. The most famous beautiful professor of Hunan University didn't look good in this posture now. However, Yan Hui immediately squatted down and tried to help Lu Yuwang pull off the adhesive, but of course it was in vain. She looked up and found that the teacher had gone to the side to make a phone call, So she could only say to Lu Yuang comfortingly, "Don't worry, I'll find a way." Listening to her tone, Lu Yuang was full of confidence in her teacher, the feeling of a woman blindly trusting the man she admired, so she nodded, and admitted a little uncomfortably that if she encountered a crisis, there would be no one next to her. With Lu Chang'an, he probably also has this kind of trust, this is the situation now. Yan Hui looked at Lu Yuang, the woman who had become an experimental subject like herself. Compared with herself, Lu Yuang's experience seemed to be less setbacks and difficulties, which can be seen from the fact that she still maintains a somewhat innocent and charming look in her eyes. Women who have been tortured by reality rarely retain this kind of temperament. Yan Hui smiled slightly and looked up at the teacher's back. The conversation between the teacher and Lu Yuang just now didn't feel like strangers. Lu Yuang recognized the teacher and was not as curious or surprised as he had not seen him for a long time. But it doesn't seem to be a relationship of close lovers. I don't know why, Yan Hui has been thinking that the teacher shouldn't be able to resist a woman like Lu Yuang, right? Lu Chang'an called Qin Yinan, and Qin Yinan asked Zhu Huntang again. Judging from Zhu Huntang's voice on the phone, she was relatively far away from Qin Yinan. Ignoring Zhu Huntang's yelling about whether he was playing a naked glue binding game with Yan Hui, Lu Chang'an hung up the phone after asking how to remove the glue. He walked to the tatami, walked to the 9th mushroom on the left, pressed down the mushroom cap, and then twisted it clockwise. Yes, it was an anti-human design that turned it clockwise. Opening the mushroom cap, there was a can of spray inside. Lu Chang'an took it in his hand and sprayed a little bit on the glue next to Lu Yuang's arm. Part of the seemingly tough and strong glue melted directly. I'm really immortal. Author, Chu Lian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 862. Lu Chang'an did not immediately use the ablation spray to rescue Lu Yuang. These stupid women always have to be punished after doing stupid things they think are self-righteous. Just like Zhou Shuling thought she would study hard to improve herself, but ended up just falling asleep while reading, and then Lu Chang'an stuffed a banana in her mouth. Just like Shang Guandandan, no, we can't use Shang Guandandan as an analogy. The Queen Mother is still much wittier than Lu Yuang and others. Just like Bamboo Huntang will be attached to the ceiling. The most accurate one was herself. Lu Chang'an once warned her not to eat the cream, but she still ate it on her own initiative. In the end, she was tortured to death by Lu Chang'an, and there was Professor Ling. It was for a similar reason today. Lu Chang'an knew what Lu Yuang was suspecting, but was she, a beautiful young woman wearing high heels and a cheongsam, investigating this kind of thing? You want to play the role of a prosecutor, right? Then at least put on black tights to facilitate movement. Spray a little more. Lu Yuang couldn't help but smile when she saw that the fiber adhesive had melted a little. She wasn't too worried about her situation in the first place. Professor Liu's life has always been about being given a pillow when she falls asleep, so she often has no clue when facing difficulties, but she is always very optimistic and faces them positively and directly. The fact is that there are many obstacles that she does not know about. It disappears under certain conditions. Squirt, Lu Yuang urged. Her tone was not as humble and polite as when asking for help from a stranger. Because even if there was no evidence, she was extremely suspicious that the Lu Jianxi in front of her was Lu Chang'an. When she faced Lu Chang'an, she would certainly not speak like a stranger. At that time, she turned into a beautiful girl and lived with Professor Ling in the Beilong Center Hotel. She thought about a question: if Lu Chang'an could turn her into a beautiful girl, he could also make the old man into a beautiful boy. A freshman at Shonan University, could it be that Lu Chang'an is the handsome boy that the old man turned into? Later, considering her own face issues, the mentality of mother and daughter getting along, the embarrassment faced by Lu Chang'an, etc., she did not delve into it, but now the old man she had carefully searched for and hoped to appear in front of her might have really revealed his true identity. She was forced to face these issues head-on again. Yan Hui looked at Lu Yuwang strangely. The teacher had just told her something, and she also knew that the teacher was living in seclusion in Junsha. She had not had contact with her old friends for many years. These old friends did not include Lu Yuwang. In short, the few words between Lu Yuwang and the teacher just now gave people the impression that they were familiar with each other, or that there was a little bit of coquettishness in Professor Liu's tone, well, or should I say coquettishness. Professor Liu, you have to have a begging attitude when asking for help. Yan Hui raised her hand to hold down the cheongsam, squatted down and bent her legs to press the back hem, and gently persuaded Lu Yuwang. She saw that Lu Yuwang actually showed some preparation. He looked angry and seemed to have no correct understanding of his situation. The teacher is a good person, but he is not the kind of person who talks easily. Why are you so willful? Do you think you are a little girl? Lu Chang'an found it a bit funny. The tone of Yan Hui and Lu Yuwang's conversation was a bit like the way Yan Qingcheng coaxed Zhu Huntang. Lu Yuwang turned around and glanced at Yan Hui. The heroine in the scandal back then, no matter what the truth was, people would never have a good impression of her. Everyone was not familiar with her. How could Professor Liu ask for half a dime to be with you? The relationship, he is most likely Professor Liu's prospective son-in-law. Professor Liu has this attitude, it's none of your business. Of course, he couldn't say these words. Lu Yuwang just glanced at Yan Hui, suddenly showed a surprised expression, and then recalled it. The scene she recalled was the time An Nuan and Lu Chang'an went to Linan for a romantic and bloody night. After Lu Yuwang found out, he rushed to Linan overnight carrying the bicycle chain. After opening the door and seeing Lu Chang'an and An Nuan, Lu Yuwang didn't have time to notice the changes in An Nuan, but after drinking water to calm down his emotions, he found that An Nuan's skin was as beautiful as glowing. Just like Yan Hui now? Just like Yan Hui now? Just like Yan Hui now? Lu Yuwang's emotions fluctuated strongly again, and she stared at Yan Hui with piercing eyes. When she hid behind the sycamore tree and peeked at Yan Hui meeting Lu Jianxi, how could Yan Hui's skin be so good? It was undeniable that even Lu Yuwang had to admit that Yan Hui, whom she had just met, had the charm of a mature woman and was considered a beauty, but now she was more than just a beauty. The thin crow's feet at the corners of the eyes disappeared, the eyebrows became soft and smooth, and even the eyelashes became straighter. The originally cloudy whites of the eyes calmed down, and the brown pupils became the dark and clear look of black pearls, which ordinary women lack. The skin with elasticity and tenderness is now rosy and soft like a girl. Not to mention the soft and delicate texture of the inner thighs, which is as soft and delicate as fish belly meat. Yan Hui will be exposed no matter how much he pays attention to it. Professor Liu has the best viewing angle from lying on the ground. I want the same thing. Lu Yuwang quickly turned around and said anxiously to Lu Jianxi. She had made such a request to him when she was in Linan, well, she made such a request to Lu Chang'an at that time. Regardless of whether he is Lu Chang'an or Lu Jianxi, Professor Liu has to do this anyway. What? Yan Hui was a little confused. What did she want? But she immediately felt a trace of jealousy in Lu Yuwang's tone and eyes. Yan Hui had already understood. She couldn't help but put her hand on her slightly sore belly and stood up, turning her head away with a blushing face. Professor Liu seems to really know some of the teacher's secrets, and has guessed some of the things he and the teacher have done. After I came in with my teacher just now, the teacher reminisced with me and relieved many doubts and knots in Yan Hui's heart, but the teacher also discovered some hidden dangers in her body. Yan Hui knows that her health is not good, and it is the kind of problem that cannot be detected in the hospital. Just like some children don't like to eat, many cases cannot be solved with modern medical methods, but some have mastered traditional techniques. The doctor will cut the epidermis on the underside of the palm and squeeze out some frog egg-like substance to solve this problem. The teacher said that he hoped to help her solve her physical problems. Yan Hui knew that seeing the teacher again would be like a dead tree blooming with spring, and her desire for survival and expectation for life were rekindled. Of course, she hoped that she would be healthy, obedient to the teacher's requirements. The teacher first took one of her fingers into his mouth and nibbled it gently. Yan Hui could feel the teacher's tongue and saliva lingering on her finger. Although she was a little shy and confused, the teacher would never do it purely for frivolity. She, as early as that year, she was used to watching him do all kinds of strange experiments with confused but trusting eyes. She was still like this at this moment, until the teacher spit out her fingertips and asked her to suck the fingers covered with the teacher's saliva. Yan Hui also followed the teacher's example and sucked gently. Did he feed you something white, sticky, like yogurt? No, it's a little richer than yogurt, not so loose, and thicker. Seeing Yan Hui's trance, Lu Yuan continued to ask. Ah, no, Yan Hui came back to her senses. Her fair cheeks were as red as Zhou Dongdong covered with watermelon paste, oozing with sweet juice. She quickly shook her head. Professor Liu's description was too bad. What he said what? Xiaoyizi, please go back to the guest house first. Lu Chang'an frowned. Yan Hui is not actually as naive and innocent as Lu Yuang. Her thoughts are more delicate and deeper than Lu Yuang's, but she is confused now. It was very easy for Lu Yuang to see some flaws, make random associations, and then make excessive demands. Of course he could refuse Lu Yuang's request, but he would eventually return to Lu Chang'an's life, and it would be more difficult to deal with Lu Yuang at that time. Okay, teacher. Yan Hui is still very obedient. She knows that the teacher will meet her again, so naturally she won't be too coquettish. Taking a look at Professor Liu's infinitely beautiful body lying on the ground, Yan Hui hoped that the teacher could do something to her. This was probably the mentality of many people who wanted to destroy some extremely beautiful food when they saw it. Don't leave, do you have a guilty conscience? What happened today? Yan Hui ignored Lu Yuang. She was just a little envious. She was also a mother. It was great that she could still be so confused. You and Zhu Huntang are long-lost sisters, Lu Chang'an couldn't help but ask when he saw Lu Yuang struggling to kick his legs, not realizing that he was in a state of being abused. Lu Yuang stopped struggling and closed his mouth in silence. Did Lu Jianxi also know Zhu Huntang? Haha, this sentence may have exposed it a little bit more. We were talking about you just now. Yan Hui said that your grandfather is Lu Yehong. Lu Chang'an looked at Lu Yuang and said, you are indeed from a scholarly family. Do you know my grandpa? Lu Yuang was born in the 1980s, and his father was born in the 1960s. His grandfather was born before the founding of the People's Republic of China. He is currently in good health and is still engaged in scientific research. Of course I know academician Lu. When the Academy of Engineering was established in the 1990s, there were a large number of official academicians, including presidents, deans, ministers, and deputy ministers. At that time, academician Lu was worried about not being able to enter the Academy of Sciences. When he saw the Academy of Engineering, I was overjoyed when it was established. After a smooth operation, I became an academician of the Academy of Engineering. My quota was occupied. Well, the reason seems to be that I am too young. For Lu Chang'an, this is not something worth worrying about. Academicians enjoy the life, work, and medical treatment of deputy ministerial level. In some provinces with few academicians, they can certainly have more resources. In the early days of its establishment, the status of academicians of the Academy of Engineering in people's hearts was far lower than that of the Academy of Sciences, but the treatment given by the state was no worse than that of the Academy of Sciences. After long-term adjustments and standardization, the current Academy of Engineering has changed from what it used to be. For example, the god of agriculture is an academician of the Academy of Engineering. Lu Chang'an's research work at that time had entered a stagnation and bottleneck, and he didn't care about things like salary at all. He lived in Tongza building with his colleagues and friends. When he had nothing to do, he could drink beer together, visit each other, and play cards. That was life. Pleasure. Now that I think about it, it feels good to repay my debt. I'm really immortal. Author, Chu Lian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 863. It is generally said that fathers' debts are paid by sons, but Professor Liu's father and Professor Lu Jianxi were once colleagues, and they had very little contact with each other. Hunan University is so big that teachers do not always look up and down, so that reunited many years later, Lu Chang'an saw in Nuan's grandfather, but he didn't have many memories of the past. Professor Liu's father didn't provoke him, so he was a bit embarrassed to repay his father's debt to his son. However, Professor Lu always made trouble, and based on the starting point of teaching her a lesson, there was no problem at all in repaying his debt to his son. Lu Yuwang frowned. His grandfather had already settled in the capital and had not been to southern Hunan for many years. However, he used his contacts in the past and existing resources to give Professor Lu a lot of help in his work, otherwise, Professor Lu would be an associate professor at most. Regarding the matter of grandfather's selection of academicians back then, Professor Lu knew some inside information that was different from Professor Lu Jianxi's. She straightened her waist and moved to a relatively elegant posture to make herself more imposing. She sneered, "Although Grandpa is older than you, he can be considered your contemporaries. We went to the countryside back then. At that time, my grandfather lived in the home of a fellow villager, and the eldest son of that fellow villager was killed by a zombie while digging a well. Do you still remember?" Lu Chang'an stood up straight and looked down at Lu Yuwang. Professor Liu's figure was enchanting, especially when she was lying on her side. No matter how she crossed her legs or twisted her waist, she could not hide her spring beauty, cold temperament, and fair skin. Her leg muscles were particularly attractive, which made Lu Chang'an's thoughts drift back to that year. Lu Chang'an had many experiences going to the countryside, and he needed to sort out whether there was any shared past with Lu Yeheng in his memory. After many people went to the countryside, they never went back. After many people returned to the city, they never returned to the countryside where they spent their youth. Lu Chang'an is an exception. Like Mondo, he can marry Nair whenever he wants. He has gone to the countryside more than once and is extremely active in the upsurge of building a new socialist countryside. If Lu Yuwang hadn't told such a ridiculous rumor that he was harmed by a zombie, it would be really difficult for Lu Chang'an to recall it. That time when I went to the countryside, I lived in the same hometown as Lu Yeheng. This fellow has 5 sons and 1 daughter. Fortunately, he is a craftsman, and the couple is willing to work hard. In those days, raising 6 children was difficult, but when the children grew up and were able to work, the situation at home is much better than that of ordinary people's homes. Because of this, the fellow villagers assigned 2 educated youths, Lu Jianxi and Lu Yeheng. At that time, the village was building a road, and an ancient tomb came out while digging the mountain. The tomb was very large, but the villagers didn't take it seriously. It looked like the feudal aristocracy that once oppressed the people, so why not give it to the tomb? Raised. Among the educated youth who worked together, there happened to be a history major, and they knew that this ancient tomb was very valuable and of great archaeological significance, so they had to unite with other educated youths to try to prevent the villagers from continuing to destroy the ancient tomb. Of course, Lu Yeheng also supports the protection of ancient tombs and plans to send people back to the city to contact relevant departments. However, in the eyes of this group of people who protect ancient tombs, there is one person who seems out of place. He is Lu Jianxi. Lu Jianxi had different ideas from other educated youths. He didn't care about the protection of ancient tombs at all, and even advised the villagers to hide the treasures dug out. This kind of low ideological consciousness is not even as good as the advanced elements among the villagers, which is very disappointing. Disdainful. From this moment on, Lu Yeheng didn't like Lu Jianxi. If it was just like this, the resentment would not continue into the future. The key is that the eldest son of the fellow villager at that time was very prestigious in the village. In order to allow the village to pass through the village as soon as possible, he led a group of people in the village to secretly work in the middle of the night to prepare the ancient tomb. That area was filled in. As a result, something happened that night. The eldest son fell into a pit in the ancient tomb, which was not very deep, but lost his life in it. When the body was taken out, a bite mark was found on his neck, so there was rumor has it that he was killed by a zombie. When the eldest son had an accident, the fellow villagers were naturally devastated. Fortunately, the family had left incense, and there were many sons in the village. After the funeral, everyone slowly returned to normal life. The fellow's family is very famous and powerful in the local area, so the eldest son also married a very beautiful wife. Lu Yehung lived in the fellow's house and saw her every day. Lu Yehung inevitably felt some pity for the orphans and the widowed. So Lu Yehung would go to the little widow whenever he had something to do, or perform some activities with her present, and actively perform, singing, dancing, reciting poems, and telling stories from world-famous books, all Lu Yehung was good at. Lu Yehung could often see her listening carefully, with admiration shining in her eyes, or staring at him tenderly with a slight smile on her lips. Just when Lu Yehung felt that the two of them had a good connection, one night his body was burning with fire and he couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. He was about to go to the well to take a bath. Stepping under the moonlight that was like daylight, he saw the delicate figure of the little widow walking away. On the field ridge. Her body was so graceful. The floral trousers wrapped around her buttocks, which were as plump and round as a big watermelon in the field. Lu Yehung thought to himself, could she not be able to sleep either? I followed up and whispered a few love words to her quietly. Under such moonlight, I must be able to clearly see the charm and shyness on her cheeks. After just a few steps, he found the little widow getting into a shed. Lu Yehung felt like he was struck by lightning, because he knew that it was Lu Jianshi's turn to guard the melon shed tonight. When you went to the countryside, do you still remember the little sister-in-law and daughter-in-law you played with? Grandpa feels that he has squeezed your place, so there is no need to feel guilty. Lu Yuang's tone was calm, as if he didn't hold any position. In fact, from Lu Yuang's point of view, there was nothing wrong with Lu Jianshi taking the lead. Things between men and women were about mutual affection, and it was not whoever fell in love with him first. But she also felt that there was nothing wrong with Grandpa being resentful because of this and being able to squeeze Lu Jianshi's quota. Last autumn, a mosquito bit Lu Yuang. She chased it until midnight, and finally squeezed the mosquito to death. Sleep peacefully. Vengeance must be retaliated, and it doesn't matter if you use some means. If Professor Lu wants to learn from his grandfather, he must be such a cruel, ruthless, and scheming woman. When Lu Chang'an heard Lu Yuang's words, he came back to his senses. He really had never thought about what happened in the days when he went to the mountains and countryside. Lu Yehung was able to hold grudges until the 1990s and allowed him to successfully take revenge, even though Lu Jianshi didn't care at all. Passed the academician selection. If you think about it carefully, if your grandfather had slept with a girl's sister-in-law or something when he was going to the countryside, he might have stayed in the countryside, and you, Professor Lu, would have become another Lu Dahong, Lu Xiaohong, Lu Xiaofang, and so on. Everything has a cause and effect. Lu Chang'an was slightly emotional. Lu Yuang looked at the exquisite cheongsam she had customized at explanation, and then thought about the big red flowers on her head, the plateau red on her cheeks, and the chapped skin on her palms, and she couldn't help but shudder. Your grandfather has a reason to retaliate against me, but it's wrong for you to use it as an excuse. Lu Chang'an squatted down again and touched Lu Yuang's head. Usually in front of her, he always has to retain a bit of quasi-son-in-law attitude, but in fact, Lu Chang'an often wants to touch Lu Yuang's head. Lu Chang'an likes to touch silly but cute or beautiful animals. Touch their heads. You're right, Professor Lu is a scheming woman. Of course she has to be flexible, so she decided to compromise temporarily. If you can help me melt these sticky things, I will pretend that I didn't see you and Yan date with flowers and leaves. Lie down slowly. Lu Chang'an placed the ablation spray in front of Lu Yuwang. But he saw that Lu Yuwang's collar on the chest of her cheongsam spread out due to her struggle, revealing a heart shape, which felt more suitable for placing a long bottle, so he inserted the spray bottle into it, clapped his hands and left. Lu Yuwang was stunned and blushing. She watched him walk to the door and then shouted, "Hey! Hey! Professor Lu! Grandpa Lu!" Of course Professor Lu Jianxi was much younger than Lu Yeheng, but he could still be considered a contemporary. There was nothing wrong with Professor Lu calling him Grandpa Lu. Unfortunately, even if he called him Grandpa, he still left without looking back. Lu Chang'an closed the door and could no longer hear Lu Yuwang's yelling. He turned back and glanced at the password input panel. He was not worried that someone could break in and do whatever they wanted to Professor Lu, who had no resistance. Most people would never imagine such a seemingly complex password system, but the password is simply 123,456. That means the brain circuits of Lu Yuwang and Zhu Huntang have inadvertently formed a resonance, and a third person who can resonate with their brain circuits. It could only be someone like Zhou Shuling, and Zhou Shuling would not come over. What's more, he was sure that Qin Yanan should also put Zhu Huntang down. The first thing Zhu Huntang did when he came down from the ceiling was to run here to see what happened, and Professor Lu would be saved. Zhu Huntang's curiosity is as strong as that of a 3-year-old child, ignorant and fearless. Lu Chang'an has no plans to go back to see Yan Hui immediately. Since he has decided to take care of Yan Hui and Yan Qingcheng, there will be more opportunities and time to meet in the future. I will not go to the afternoon class, Lu Chang'an sighed. He originally planned to study hard this semester, but fortunately, what he wanted at the beginning was to skip classes as little as possible instead of never skip classes and skip once in a while. The class is fair enough. Everyone is like this. If you are too stubborn and persistent, you will inevitably be a little independent. Ordinary college students should look like ordinary college students. Who is an ordinary college student if he doesn't skip classes? So Lu Chang'an stood outside the door, pinched his face in front of the glass curtain wall, and returned to the appearance of Lu Chang'an, an ordinary college student. Go back first. Lu Chang'an walked home, opened the door, and heard the sound of the TV in the living room. Shang Guan stared blankly, barely keeping his eyes open to watch TV. When he saw Lu Chang'an coming home, he looked more awake, and pursed his lips. Pour a glass of champagne and drink it. The champagne water tastes really good. Li Hongfang knows how to do things. She has a big butt and looks like she is very good at giving birth. I wonder when Lu Chang'an will visit her. Shang Guandandan waved to Lu Chang'an, wanting to teach him how to do it face to face, teaching him to cut off flowers when they are worth it, and don't wait until the flowers change color. Lu Chang'an ignored her and Shang Guandandan waved to people, making people feel like she was teasing cats and dogs. Come here quickly and give you meat buns to eat. This was how Shang Guandandan greeted Lucine, but Lucine felt that Shang Guandandan was just a bone without meat and had a low status, so he ignored her. Only when Shang Guandandan took out the meat buns would he run over with his head shaking. He took out his phone because he saw Zhou Dongdong lying on the ground. From time to time, he lifted his legs and pulled them randomly in the air, and then arched his body. The movements are relatively frequent, and they look like maggots, very similar to each other. After taking a video with his mobile phone, Lu Chang'an frowned and asked, "What are you doing?" His house is an old house, and he did not actively put up the fashionable porcelain tiles in the 1980s and 1990s, nor did he lay down wooden floors later. He was too lazy to take care of and maintain the wooden floors. If he did not take care and maintain the wooden floors, it would be worse than not having them at all. Shop. The cement floor easily accumulates dust. Zhou Dongdong rubbed it on the ground like this. Obviously he was no longer afraid of Zhou Shuling's magical ability to beat children. I'm practicing Kung Fu. Zhou Dongdong felt that practicing Kung Fu was similar to studying. He should not be beaten if he soiled his clothes because of studying, so he was fearless for the time being and told Brother Chang'an calmly that he was learning Kung Fu. Maggot boxing. Lu Chang'an thought of Zhu Huntang's alpaca Kung Fu. It is a very traditional naming method to learn the movements of animals and then name them. XX boxing, such as horse boxing, monkey boxing, tiger boxing, and so on. Since Zhu Huntang invented the alpaca Kung Fu, it is normal for Zhou Dongdong to come up with the maggot fist. There are many similarities between the two people. For example, they are both ranked last in their grade. She's practicing the carp thrust. Shang Guandandan chuckled, not dissatisfied with the fact that Motzi did not come over to listen to his mother's training, but was attracted by Zhou Dongdong's attention. Is this how you do carp ejaculation? Carp will be silent when they see it. They are even willing to jump into the pot and be braised in brown sauce, and they don't want to admit that you are a carp ejaculation. Lu Chang'an shook his head. He lifted Zhou Dongdong up and stood, and then took a few photos of her dusty back. What's that like? Zhou Dongdong lay down again, then raised his legs and scratched in the air. Is this what it looks like? I watched good guys on TV being beaten by bad guys, and they always got up like this. That one is called an oolong stirrup. Lu Chang'an took off his coat and showed Zhou Dongdong the two movements of oolong stirring and carp thrusting. I want to learn. Zhou Dongdong quickly hugged Lu Chang'an's thigh, his dark eyes wide open, full of eagerness to learn. Lu Chang'an patted his back leisurely and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. The most important thing about these two movements is to use your waist, but do you have a waist? I have a waist, Zhou Dongdong said quickly, then felt around on his body, trying to find the waist. Lu Chang'an pointed to his belly button, waist, and chest. Did you see? This is the waist, and the existence of this section is the key to being able to use it to stir up the trouble and push the carp. Zhou Dongdong also picked up his clothes, and then looked at his round belly. Where was his waist? The top of the belly seems to be the chest, unlike Brother Chang'an's belly and chest, which has a section in between. This discovery surprised Zhou Dongdong. Where is my waist? You have no waist. Lu Chang'an told her this cruel reality. I have a waist, my waist, my waist, ouch. Zhou Dongdong insisted that he had a waist, but after looking over and over, he couldn't find his waist, so he howled and threw himself forward. Guandandan said, Sister Dandan, do you have a waist? Shang Guandandan put the thermos bottle on the table to block Lu Chang'an's view. He slowly slid down and sat between the electric heating table and the sofa. Then he pulled up his clothes a little, letting Zhou Dongdong look at his waist, and then he was filled with excitement. Looking at Zhou Dongdong's expression expectantly. I have no waist, I am the only one who has no waist. Where is my waist, where is my waist? Zhou Dongdong was extremely sad. Why did he have no waist? It was because his mother deliberately made her round when she gave birth to her. Yes, I have become a round kid with no waist. Do only people who look like Lone have waists? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 864. Lu Chang'an had just sent the photos and video of Zhou Dongdong twisting on the ground to Zhou Shuling when he saw Zhou Shuling walking into the living room while looking at her phone. Zhou Dongdong, who was lying on the edge of the sofa howling, immediately stood up. She opened her mouth and howled. It was just a gesture, not a real child who was so sad that she cried bitterly. Just seeing her mother's expression, Zhou Dongdong knew that it was time to spank the child again. She rolled her eyes and wondered whether she should hide under the electric heating table or bravely rush out of the room at the speed of a light-speed gyroman. Where is the door? Obviously, practicing martial arts is the same as studying. You should not be beaten if your clothes are dirty, but my mother obviously does not agree with this principle. But Zhou Dongdong found that his mother stopped and stared at Brother Chang'an's back. Brother Chang'an was waiting for something with a smile. When he found that his mother was not moving, he turned to look at her, so Zhou Dongdong stood next to the electric heating table and prepared to check the situation first. Why is there dust on your shirt? Zhou Shuling looked at Lu Chang'an suspiciously. Recently, she had wisely discovered that when Zhou Dongdong does stupid things, if Lu Chang'an is also there, he is probably also involved. Ahem, this. When Lu Chang'an was demonstrating to Zhou Dongdong, he took off his coat specifically, but he didn't expect that there would be clues of flaws left behind. Could it be that I have been using my waist less recently and my waist strength is insufficient? Lu Chang'an was so suspicious. Cackle. Shang Guandandan laughed. It seemed that Xiaoling was influenced by him, learned Gongdo's skills, and finally became more witty. I don't know when the other daughters-in-law will also show some learning results. Shang Guandandan hopes that they will start some palace fighting activities when they have nothing to do, so that Shang Guandandan can participate more deeply and show the Queen Mother's experience in palace fighting. And overall control. Of course, these palace fighting activities must be controlled under a certain intensity. Like traditional palace fighting in ancient times, methods that easily kill people are not allowed. Shang Guandandan decided that Sunangziu must not participate in it, otherwise it would inevitably get out of control and hurt Shang Guan. Dandan's beloved daughters-in-law. You made her roll on the ground again, right? Zhou Shuling turned her head and glanced at Zhou Dongdong, who was observing the situation, and stared at Lu Chang'an with the eyes of the culprit. How could it be? When I came back, she was on the ground. If you want to blame you, you have to blame the person holding the thermos bottle and watching the fun. This is simply a mouthful. Lu Chang'an always uses a positive approach to encourage Zhou Dongdong to study. How could progress make Zhou Dongdong roll on the ground? For example, he was teaching her kung fu just now. This was also for the purpose of strengthening her body and increasing her hobbies. It's you. It's you. It's you. How could Zhou Shuling find trouble with Shang Guandandan? She raised her hand and patted the dusty spot on Lu Chang'an's shirt, intending to take the opportunity to hit him. Why do you beat people up without any basis? Zhou Shuling spanked him again, and finally hit his butt. The tentacles were slightly elastic but also firm and full. She couldn't help but feel her cheeks heat up. She quickly retracted her hand, held her 5 fingers together and squeezed. A little embarrassed, there is dust on your butt, isn't it evidence? However, Lu Chang'an happened to see some dust on Zhou Shuling's skirt that didn't know where it came from. He took the opportunity to pat it. There is dust on your butt too? I think you are also suspicious. You must have taught Zhou Dongdong how to do it. He rolled on the ground, escaped before I came back, and then came back to frame me again. Ah, ugh, how could I be so boring? Zhou Shuling's body trembled and she sobbed in her throat, hastily saying, I'm not that boring. After saying that, she hit Lu Chang'an a little unconvinced. Anyway, when he saw Zhou Dongdong rolling on the ground, he took a video photo first and didn't pull her up. It was a fact. Lu Chang'an looked at Zhou Shuling's tight-fitting velvet skirt and thought of Professor Liu's equally graceful and plump curves lying on the tatami. He couldn't help but feel that the best way to punish these women with their buttocks is spanking. Thinking like this, the palm fell again. This time the blow was more serious. Zhou Shuling was ashamed and hurt, so she quickly hit him back a few more times. But when she turned her head, she found that Zhou Dongdong was watching her and Lu Chang'an playing with each other, with his hands clasped together, his mouth slightly open, and his eyes full of anticipation. This look is exactly the same as when Lu Chang'an wants to watch Zhou Shuling beat a child. Zhou Shuling suddenly became angry. She turned around and pulled out the bamboo strips behind the TV, preparing to teach the stupid and daring child a lesson. Did he actually know how to watch his mother's jokes? Ouch! When Zhou Dongdong saw his mother turning around and walking towards the TV in an angry manner, Zhou Dongdong realized that the bamboo strips, which were more powerful than the golden cudgel, were hidden there. Run away! Zhou Dongdong swung his round claws, twisted his body, jumped to the door, and hurried downstairs. Let's see where you can run. You have to come back to eat. Zhou Shuling angrily chased her to the door, threatening her with her hands on her hips, but did not pursue her. There is really no other way. Zhou Dongdong runs up and down every day, and even running away on the stairs is like walking on flat ground. Zhou Shuling can't do it. She wants her butt to be raised and look better, so she wears high heels. Thinking of this, Zhou Shuling returned to the living room and spanked Lu Chang'an. Wasn't it because he said her butt was more upturned and beautiful that she wanted to wear high heels every day? Otherwise, she would have caught up with Zhou Dongdong just now. Dongdong won't be back until dinner time, Shang Guandandan said with gusto after watching the daily family farce with gusto, and quickly poured champagne water to drink, which slightly diluted the unfinished feeling. You have to pay attention to your education methods and don't just beat the children. Lu Chang'an took back the bamboo stick in Zhou Shuling's hand. This thing is most powerful in summer and autumn. When it is drawn on the skin, it will be like a red mark, like a staff. Now, at this time, it can only play a strategic deterrent role. Zhou Shuling cannot use this thing to hit Zhou Dongdong. Face. Zhou Dongdong often clenched his fists and shrank into his sleeve pockets. It was still difficult to use bamboo strips to achieve actual effects, but Zhou Dongdong's reaction still showed how terrifying it was. If a child is not beaten at home when she is young, she will be beaten outside when she grows up. I would rather she be beaten at home. Zhou Shuling's education concept is very simple, and she felt angry and funny when she said, "You don't know how to beat children." These words are actually "you said." Do you know what happened in 1509 during the Ming dynasty? Lu Chang'an shook his head and said to Zhou Shuling. Zhou Shuling's eyes widened, knowing that Lu Chang'an often questioned others, and Zhou Shuling was often questioned. Did he think that Zhou Shuling had studied hard recently and made some progress, so he raised such a profound historical knowledge question? How do I know? Zhou Shuling thought for a while. She hadn't read any history books recently, so it was reasonable for her to be unable to answer. In the year 1509 of the Ming dynasty, that was after my country was stolen by thieves, many years, but it can be regarded as orthodox among us Han people. Shang Guandandan sighed slightly, so he stopped pouring champagne into the lid. He poured it into his mouth and drank. Shang Guandandan's historical knowledge mainly came from Lu Chang'an's coffin teaching to her, as well as from online novels and TV series, so she couldn't figure out the specific number of many years. In 1509 of the Ming dynasty, which was the fourth year of Zheng reign of Emperor Wuzong of the Ming dynasty, Wang Shaoren gave a lecture at the Wenming Academy and clearly and publicly proposed the idea of integrating knowledge and action. Lu Chang'an said. Ah, Zhou Shuling couldn't understand. He was clearly saying that he was not qualified to ask others not to hit children, so why did he suddenly jump to someone in the history book? It is difficult to unite knowledge and action. I know mentally that it is not good to hit children all the time, but behaviorally I like to encourage you to hit children. This is why it is difficult to unite knowledge and action. If I can unite knowledge and action, then my state will be it's very high, but unfortunately I'm just an ordinary person. How can I always achieve the unity of knowledge and action? Lu Chang'an explained. Do you understand? Zhou Shuling was stunned for a moment, then patted the hem of his shirt. It seemed that the dust couldn't be patted off. Forget it, let's wait for him to change and wash it for him. Zhou Shuling didn't think about what she didn't understand, and turned to the kitchen to prepare for cooking. Lu Chang'an smiled. The unity of knowledge and action is certainly not what he said. In fact, in the evolution of civilization and morality becoming the invisible driving force for action, it is precisely because the Chinese people have accepted the guiding concept of the unity of knowledge and action intentionally or unintentionally. For example, in the face of major disasters, Chinese people pay more attention to the unity of knowledge and action and the unity of thoughts and actions, so countless touching heroic deeds will emerge. In some countries, they don't understand what the unity of knowledge and action means. So when a building is stepped on and a person is buried, many people come to hang wreaths, light candles, sing, commemorate, and cry. But those who helped excavate not even one. Because they don't understand what the unity of knowledge and action means. They are just a group of things whose spiritual, moral, and ideological civilization evolution is almost the same as that of animals. Occasionally, good people and good deeds may appear due to the consciousness of individual people, but the overall society does not have the unity of knowledge and action at all. One concept of higher civilization. People who understand the unity of knowledge and action will feel strong contempt, confusion, and even physical disgust when they look at the behavior of people who have no concept of the unity of knowledge and action. From the matter of beating children, you can combine knowledge with action. Shang Guandandan stood up with a thermos bottle on his back, walked behind Lu Chang'an, jumped on his back, hugged his neck and lay down. I can also carefully analyze the behavior of you lying on my back and find out that you are having your period today. Lu Chang'an turned his head and mocked with a smile. Shang Guandandan tilted her head and glanced at him. She didn't know how he knew it, but it wasn't something she cared about. Shang Guandandan opened her mouth wide and bit Lu Chang'an's neck. Didn't he always say she was a zombie? The zombie queen is menstruating. Wouldn't it be natural for her to bite your neck and suck some blood? The day before yesterday, I posted a picture in the drumstick group, and my account was blocked for a week. I am temporarily unable to access QQ. Those who ordered the photos, please be patient. I will fix the pictures and organize them and send them as soon as possible. It has been delayed for more than a month, I'm sorry. I'm really immortal. Author, Chu Lian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 865. After Shang Guandandan bit Lu Chang'an's neck, he let go of his hands and hung them on his back. Then he rolled his eyes upwards and stared at the TV. There was a news broadcast on the TV. A middle-aged man was admitted to the hospital. Beer bottles, screwdrivers, milk tea straws, air conditioner remote controls and other items were taken out from his intestines, weighing more than 10 kilograms. Shang Guandandan wanted to ask Lu Chang'an if he could do it, but he was unwilling to let go of his neck, so he didn't ask. Lu Chang'an saw a middle-aged and elderly man with a mosaic on the TV being interviewed. He explained that he made a bet with a friend and was pranked by the bad friend. Disgusting thing. Of course Lu Chang'an would not believe this explanation. He turned around and glanced at Shang Guandandan, but she was biting his neck and her cheek was close at hand. Lu Chang'an turned his head and his lips touched her forehead. Shang Guandandan raised his eyebrows and glanced at him again. It was normal for a moth to kiss his mother's forehead, but it was hard to say whether a man and a woman were kissing each other. Shang Guandandan didn't care and continued to stare at the TV. When the news changed, Lu Chang'an also changed his attention and shook his body, trying to throw Shang Guandandan off. As a result, her body was shaken left and right, but her teeth always bit Lu Chang'an's neck. Lu Chang'an wanted to spin her at high speed and throw her up like a helicopter propeller, but what if she really flew up and broke the ceiling? Zhou Shuling took a look in the kitchen, which reminded her of the zombie movies she had seen before. This is how zombies bite people's necks. It's just that Shang Guandandan, this little zombie is too cute. Even if he opens his mouth wide and bites people, he won't bite. Looks terrible. Lu Chang'an couldn't get rid of Shang Guandandan, so Zhou Shuling asked him to take out the tune from the refrigerator upstairs, and Lu Chang'an walked upstairs and down again. When Lu Chang'an was about to walk into the kitchen, Shang Guandandan released his teeth and jumped off his back vigilantly. She had to be prepared for Lu Chang'an to take the opportunity to lock her into the kitchen and force Shang Guandandan to do housework. The little queen mother was too weak to resist. Your skin is so thick. Zhou Shuling glanced at the tooth marks on Lu Chang'an's neck. They were shallow, but they really looked like those bitten by zombies or vampires in movies. They were just pink lip marks and small ones. The teeth marks give the impression that a cute little zombie is being naughty. Lu Chang'an also thought of Zhu Huntang once using lipstick to draw bite marks on the back of his hand, while announcing that she was a noble vampire and Lu Chang'an was her dependent. No matter how thick my skin is it as thick as yours? Lu Chang'an glanced at Zhou Shuling's butt. Zhou Dongdong claimed that Zhou Shuling's face was as thick as her butt. Of course, the thickness of the skin is not the same thing as the thickness of the face buttocks. Skin is skin. The thickness of the face and buttocks generally includes muscle and fat. The face and butt are very similar, and the shape is similar to the surrounding objects. They are also two-parted, and the functions are similar. For example, the slap in the face that people often talk about is actually the same as spanking in that it has a certain humiliating nature. Between men and women, touching the face and touching the butt are similar in nature, but touching the face is more tactful. Therefore, many people touch their face in public to show that they and the person whose face is touched can touch their butt. Lu Chang'an did not touch Zhou Shuling's face intentionally, which means that he did not want to touch Zhou Shuling's butt, which to a certain extent proved that the relationship between the two was very pure. Zhou Shuling's fingers were wet, so she pressed her cheek with the back of her hand. There were several thin finger dimples on the back of her fingers, which made them look rounder and rounder. Zhou Shuling suddenly remembered that her fingers were slender but looked skinny in the past. Compared with now, they were completely thin. Another pair of hands. I hope that kind and hard-working people in this world will be as happy as herself, Zhou Shuling thought, looking down at the bottles and cans on the kitchen table. One hand underneath shook Lu Chang'an's palm. It feels like, is it here yet? My skin is getting better and better, and there are no calluses at all. Where is it thicker? Zhou Shuling held it for a moment and then let go. Her palms felt numb at that moment, as if they were stuck together and no longer belonged to her. In a sense, I am indeed a bit thick-skinned, and dare to do such a thing. In fact, I want to let him know that my skin is getting better and better. Just raise my hand and let him take a look, and don't let him feel it. But just now he was looking at her butt, and Zhou Shuling didn't let him touch it or raise it up on purpose, which meant that she still wanted to be shy and her skin wasn't very thick. Zhou Shuling patted her cheek. Really, what are you thinking about? It must be the after effects of drinking coffee in the afternoon. Zhou Shuling had not drunk coffee many times, so this kind of thing had a strong effect on her. After the stimulating effect of caffeine disappeared, she kept feeling a little dizzy. Have you finished eating what I gave you? Lu Chang'an felt the changes in the skin of her palms. There were some calluses on her hands. As long as life is good, the cocoons will slowly disappear, but this will also take a relatively long time. Now the cocoons have disappeared. Of course, the things Lu Chang'an gave have worked. People who often play games have experience. If the palm of the hand that often holds the mouse is scratched, calluses will appear, and it will take 2 to 3 years for the calluses to disappear without careful maintenance. Many middle-aged men, looking at their white and round tiger's mouth and thinking about the mouse hands of the past, can't help but feel sad and sad. The cocoon of the tiger's mouth has disappeared, and the days of fighting again and again in internet cafes all night long can never go back. Even if you have the will, you have no power. The chances of sudden death such as cerebral infarction, myocardial infarction, etc. are greatly increased, so I don't dare to do it anymore. Lu Chang'an also wanted to try the feeling of sudden death. At this point, it was difficult to achieve the level of ordinary people. After all, it was too difficult, which was a bit regretful. No, just one drop at a time. I feel like I can eat it for a long time. Zhou Shuling shook her head, and then said a little distressedly, last time Miss Susan came over to play, she saw me eating it. I heard that you gave it to me, and she also wanted to taste it, but she vomited it after tasting a drop and said it was super disgusting. It's actually a bit rude for Zhu Huntang to do this, but Zhou Shuling doesn't care, because that's the kind of person Zhu Huntang is, and he didn't do it intentionally. Zhou Shuling just thinks it's a waste. This is a gift from Lu Chang'an to herself, and it seems to be a very precious thing. It's so strange. I think it tastes very good and has a nice smell. Why does Zhu Huntang say it's disgusting? Zhou Shuling asked puzzledly. It's nothing strange. If you go to a street shop or ordinary restaurant and buy her some popular food, she will still feel nauseous and vomiting, and then feel like she's been poisoned. Lu Chang'an patted Zhou Shuling's shoulder as usual. Don't do it again. I gave it to others to taste, including Shang Guandandan and Zhou Dongdong. Oh, I understand. After hearing Lu Chang'an's instructions, Zhou Shuling felt that she had done something wrong and asked in a low voice, what is that thing? Nothing. Water, protein, fat, sugar, lecithin, inorganic salts, lactic acid, fructose, enzymes, calcium, magnesium, zinc, selenium, potassium and other nutrients. Lu Chang'an briefly analyzed the ingredients and told the truth. Wow, I feel very nutritious when I hear it. No wonder after eating it, my body seems to be much better and my skin is also good. Others say that I feel very moisturized. Zhou Shuling patted her face with satisfaction and looked at it with some expectation and praise. Lu Chang'an, no matter what other people say, it makes Zhou Shuling a little happy at most, but if she praises her, Zhou Shuling will feel like Zhou Dongdong receiving the certificate, spinning like a small plane and flying into the sky. It feels particularly moisturizing? Who said that? Lu Chang'an frowned and asked. Uncle Qian. This old man doesn't cultivate. Lu Chang'an cursed and didn't take it seriously. Old men and women, represented by old man Qian, were doing nothing all day long and were not of high quality. The inheritance of life is a picture that slowly unfolds over the long years, moistening things silently. The super life energy contained in these things originally has the same origin as the super life energy in the blood, but it is much gentler, so it is more suitable for ordinary people. Human physique. Lu Chang'an nodded and did not explain any more. Zhou Shuling blinked. She didn't understand, so she didn't ask any more questions. Just like she didn't bother to think about things she couldn't understand. At present, most of the questions that Zhou Shuling can't understand but is too lazy to think about are related to Shang Guandandan. Why is Dandan so powerful? Why is Dandan so lazy? Why does Dandan like to lie in the coffin? It's hard to ask her directly. I want to eat couple's lung slices. Shang Guandandan stood outside the kitchen and said pointedly. Lu Chang'an glanced at her, and Shang Guandandan stepped back a little to avoid entering the radiation range of the kitchen. Everything has a certain radiation range, such as the radiation range of the kitchen. When entering it, Lu Chang'an will say, make whatever you want to eat. But if you leave this radiation range, for example, if Shang Guandandan yells downstairs about what he wants to eat, Lu Chang'an will at most say, go upstairs to eat by yourself. Do you want someone to give it to you? That's it? Ah, I don't have the ingredients to make couple's lung slices at home, so let's order takeout today. There is a restaurant in the mall that makes delicious ones. Okay, Zhou Shuling said to Shang Guandandan. Okay. Shang Guandandan nodded repeatedly and walked into the kitchen to touch Zhou Shuling's head. Since she ordered takeout, there was nothing to do in the kitchen. Shang Guandandan walked into the kitchen bravely and was not worried about Lu Chang'an forcing her to work. Cook rice. Lu Chang'an handed the rice sieve to Shang Guandandan. Shang Guandandan opened his mouth slightly and looked at Lu Chang'an in disbelief. Why could Lu Chang'an always find housework for her? Where can anyone order takeout and not order rice? Shang Guandandan walked out of the house angrily. She would stand at the gate of the community and wait for the delivery boy and sister to arrive before going home with the delivery boy. Thanks to Ning 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 for his generous reward, a new leader has been added to this book.